G'day.
Good day, Matthew.
How are you?
Well, it's good to be. I think this is my 5th time on your show.
Is it?
I started on the Matt Fradd show.
It's very kind of you to come on that because we had 18 followers back then and you still agreed to come on.
Yeah, I remember. No, it was a great conversation. It was in, where were you in Georgia at the time?
North of Atlanta and Cumming.
Yeah.
You know, what's funny is I think that COVID lockdowns sort of accelerated the technology needed to stream. But back then it was more difficult. So we were actually at a studio that I rented. Remember?
Yeah, I remember that. Was that 2018 maybe?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is my 3rd or 4th time in this studio, I think. So always a joy to be with you, Matt.
And that yesterday, well, we should tell people this. This is very exciting. This was your idea.
Mm-hmm.
We have just recorded a 7-part series.
6-part. I don't know why you keep saying 7.
6-part. I don't know either. A 6-part series on love and responsibility.
Yeah.
I thought each episode was going to be like 20 minutes, but they were like an hour and a half each. And it's good that they were. And we are going to, so now that we've recorded them, we're going to edit them. They're going to be available to our supporters all at once, all 7 of them. But
6.
Crap. You know, it's a bit.
You keep going for that perfect biblical number.
It's a bit. I just have to keep going now. Right. 7. People are going to be demanding their money back. 6. And what we're going to do is it'll be on your channel one week and then my channel one week and then back and forth.
We filmed 3 of the episodes in my channel and 3 of the episodes in your studios.
Yeah. So people should go and subscribe to your excellent Theology of the Body channel. Mm-hmm. And that'll be fun.
Theology of the Body Institute.
Okay. Yeah, it's great because Love and Responsibility is such a beautiful book.
Yeah, and it's not well. I mean, it's well known among a certain group of Catholics that it exists, but it's not widely read, and it is the answer to the crisis of our times. I remember the first time I read Love and Responsibility. It was 1994, and I was 24. And somehow this guy knew what happened in my life. And he put words to it. And he says right at the start, this is not an exposition of doctrine as much as it is a constant confrontation of doctrine with life. And he says, I challenge you, in so many words, to test everything I'm saying against your own experience of life. And that's where he makes the argument. He says, test this against your own experience. And I had been so wounded by having bought into this sexual messaging of the culture. And it's like when you take your car to a mechanic who knows exactly what's wrong with it, and you've taken it to this guy or that guy, and he couldn't figure it out, and then you find the mechanic who's like, this is what it is. That's the way I felt when I read Love and Responsibility. Like, this is the mechanic of my heart who knows the workings and the things that were not working right, and could also provide the fix, the remedy, and set me on a pilgrimage that all these years later, 30 years later, I'm still on.
Yeah, I'm thinking of an analogy, which I often do. My wife had been sick for a long time. We might be seeing some improvements now, but she went and saw a chiropractor. And I've always thought the chiropractors were, forgive me if you're a chiropractor, this might just be my bias, but like, snake oil people. Yeah, right. Or dangerous.
Maybe there are some out there who kind of give that kind of reputation.
Yeah, let me clarify that. I don't mean that they're intentionally deceiving people. I just mean the science of chiropractic. I've had a lot of people say to me, it's just not real. And so I've just always thought, okay, well, it's just bogus. But then we had a guy who used to go to Franciscan, who's a chiropractor, come here and said, let me just work on your wife. And it was like a miracle occurred. And so I'm confronted with this, I now am forced to change my opinion. It doesn't mean I understand it. I just know it works.
It did it, yeah.
And if it works, I go with it. And I think life is often like that. This makes things better. It must be true.
Yeah.
And when I read Love and Responsibility, I knew God existed at that point. I'd already come into a relationship with Christ. But I thought to myself as I read it, if I didn't believe in God, this assessment of human sexuality and the human heart and what we long for is the realest thing I've ever read that I would just believe in God based on this because it works kind of thing.
Yes. It corresponds to something I know deep in my bones already, but I didn't have the language to put to it. That was my experience of it. And in the last few years, 3 years or so, I've really given myself to a deeper dive into the text because I started teaching a course on love and responsibility for the Theology of the Body Institute and co-teaching it with my dear friend and colleague, Jeanette Clark. And if you want to learn something, teach it, right? I've been drawing from that text for 30 years in my promotion of John Paul's Theology of the Body. But I hadn't done the kind of real deep dive into it that I had in the text of the Theology of the Body. For so many years, I'd been doing the deep dive in that. But the last 3 years or so, I've given myself to a deeper dive into love and responsibility. And there are just so many layers to it. And it's almost maddening to me. Like, I want to scream from the rooftops, hey, world, do you want to know what's going on? Do you want to know what the problem is with the whole world? Here's the diagnosis. And it's what's great in terms of sharing it with a wider audience is that it's a philosophy book. And that's what our series is also trying to unpack for people, that it's not a theology of the body is obviously a theology text. It's a Bible study. It's for people of faith, right? It's an invitation to faith. You can read Love and Responsibility without any faith, and he's just reflecting on human experience.
I feel like if we could get it into the hand of Jordan Peterson, he'd fall off of his chair.
I agree. I'm
going to make that happen.
Please, let's get our series to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
I think
I'd love you to get on his show. I'm going to make that happen. I don't know. I have no power to make it happen. But the good Lord will make it happen.
The Lord wants it to happen.
Because I said this to you in our chat yesterday that it's almost irritating. Maybe to our pride more than anything, that you especially, and Jason Everett and me to a much lesser degree, have been saying these things about cohabitation and the pill and all this forever. Not forever, but for a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
And it's just been met with, well, gratitude for those who accept it, but scorn for those who weren't Christian. But now, Peterson just did an interview recently about how the pill changes women's brains and why it's bad for women.
Yeah.
You're like, what? And in his book, Beyond Order, he argues against cohabitation. Like, yeah. And he's even using the analogies that you and Jason have used about, you don't try out people, you try out cars, things like that. I'm like, that's what we've been saying. But it's like the good Lord, you can't get away from truth. There is a way things work. You can work against them. You can pretend that open marriage is a good idea, as Destiny tried to do, and it smacked him in the face. You may not know who that is. It's a YouTuber. You can pretend that contraception will have no ill effect, that adultery might be okay, or that pornography in moderate. You can pretend, but you just can't keep away from reality smacking you back.
What I think is interesting about the Jordan Peterson phenomenon is the way he's kind of built his platform reminds me, to draw an analogy, of what U2 did early on as a band. Okay. So they were I know Jordan Peterson is not as yet a professed Christian, so the analogy doesn't quite hold, but there were 3 of the band members in U2 in the early 80s who were committed Christians. They were going to regular Bible studies. They were part of this Christian community in Dublin, and they were really committed to their faith. At the same time, they had this secular rock band. And they come to America for the first time in, I think, 1980, and they're kind of wearing their Christianity on their sleeve. And then they started watching TVs in the hotels when they're on this tour, and they're seeing these televangelists on TV, and they're like, oh, when we say we're Christians, we're going to be put in this box in America. We don't want to be in that, but that's not where we're coming from at all. And they made a very explicit decision early in their career as a band to say, we're going to be Christians who play music, but we're not going to be Christian musicians, right? We're not going to be a Christian band. We want to take our message to the whole world. And if we get locked into the category of a Christian band, we're immediately limiting our audience. And you and I and people like Jason Everett have been saying these things for a long time, but we're kind of locked in some ways to a Catholic and Christian audience. Whereas Jordan Peterson can say the very same things that maybe we've been saying, but people are way outside the bounds of what you and I can reach. He's able to reach because he made he dabbles in biblical stuff. He's like, does he believe that Christ is the incarnate word? Like, I remember seeing this one video of Jordan Peterson where he was in tears, like grappling with, could it be real that the Logos, the logic behind everything, has been manifest in one person, in the incarnate? Is the Logos incarnate in Jesus Christ? And I think I don't know if he was talking to Bishop Barron or who, but there he was on camera, he was seeing the weight of it, and his tears just started to roll down his cheeks. I was like, oh. If you're raised in the church, you almost take these things for granted. The Word was made flesh, in ear and one out the other, in ear one ear and out the other. For Jordan, he was like, I saw him confronting it and feeling the weight of it and trembling. There have been times when I've trembled at the weight of the incarnation, but man, I was almost jealous. Like, I wish I could come at it from where you're coming from so that I could tremble at the implication of it. All that to say, he has a platform that he can reach with the same message or messaging that you and I might use, but he's just built an audience that he can go much further and go for it. I mean, that's awesome. More power to you, Jordan Peterson.
The Joshua Tree? Is that the name of the album?
Yeah, well, that was their 1987 album, the Joshua Tree, yeah.
I don't know if I like U2, especially a lot of the kind of political things they get into these days.
Please.
But that album might be the best album ever for me.
Yeah.
That is magical.
Do you know what the Joshua Tree is? No. It's a tree in a desert in California, but they're pictured in front of on the album cover, but the Joshua tree means the Jesus tree. Joshua is the word, there's no form of, Jesus is a form of the name Joshua. And it's kind of subtle things like that where you're not going to quite catch it at first, but they're preaching it for those with ears to hear. And of course, I do not subscribe to Bono's politics. I do not subscribe to much of his morality. I actually met Bono in 2005. Rick Santorum introduced me to Bono. Rick Santorum had brought me to DC a couple times to do some teaching for his staff on Catholic issues.
Wow.
Yeah, in the early 2000s. And he said, hey, if I can ever do anything for you, just let me know. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And a couple years later, like, I had this kind of this manifest destiny that I thought I was supposed to meet Bono and introduce him to JPII's Theology of the Body. And this is quite a fun story. Can I tell the story?
Please, yeah, I'm excited to hear it.
It's a fun story. It was October of 2005. JPII had died in April of that year. So I called up Rick Santorum because I heard Bono was going to be at the Capitol meeting with Rick Santorum. And I said, remember you said if there's anything you could do for me? He said, yeah. I said, can you sneak me into this meeting with Bono? And he says, yeah. I'll give you 10 minutes with Bono at the end of this meeting. So I have to back up, though, to share how amazing this story is. In 1999, Bono met JPII. And there's this famous picture where the Pope gives Bono a rosary, which he to this day wears around his neck. Not that you're supposed to wear it as jewelry, but he does.
You could do much worse things.
Yeah, indeed. And Bono gave the Pope his famous shades.
I remember that going viral.
Well, it didn't go viral until 2005 because somebody at the Vatican did not have a sense of humor when the Pope put Bono's shades on. The best picture you could get was the Pope holding the shades like right here, like almost putting them on. And I knew this story because I'm a huge U2 fan and I'm, of course, a huge JPII fan. And of course, I want to see the picture of JPII wearing the glasses of Bono. Well, I go to this meeting with Rick Santorum and Bono, a few other senators. There are maybe 20 people in the room. And I'm just a fly on the wall. And Bono's sitting there doing his thing, preaching his message about AIDS relief in Africa and worthy causes. Not that I agree with some of the approach of it all, but anyway, neither here nor there. At the end of this session with the senators, Bono is going to come around and greet some people, and I was promised about 10 minutes with him. Well, I see Bono's assistant lean over and whisper something in his ear, and he goes, "Oh, I almost forgot. Some of you may know the story that I met John Paul II in 1999. He doesn't know why I'm there. I'm about to introduce him to John Paul II's teaching. I have a copy of my Theology of the Body for Beginners that I'm going to hand to Bono in just a few minutes. He has no idea why I'm there. But he, of his own initiative, said, oh, I almost forgot. Something amazing happened to me today. Some of you may know that I met John Paul II in 1999. He gave me this rosary. He opens a shirt. I wear it all the time, he says. And I gave him my shades, but I've been trying to get my hands on this picture for 5-6 years. And just today, someone at the Vatican released it to me. He reaches in his pocket.
Wow.
I am at the unveiling
wow.
of this photo, and he pulls it out, and there's the Pope wearing Bono's shades. And I'm thinking, this is JPII from heaven giving me the perfect alley-oop. All I got to do is take this basketball now and slam dunk it. And Bono runs around the room with this picture. He stops right at me. This is before I was introduced to him. He doesn't know who I am. And he says, look at the wicked grin on this Pope's face. And I'm thinking to myself, Bono, if you only knew why I had such a wicked grin right now, because you don't know what's about to hit you. And I did have about 7 or 8 minutes with him. And I really felt JPII was in the room. And Bono immediately came, understandably, as an Irishman, he came out kind of with both fists up about the Catholic Church and sex.
When you spoke to him?
When I spoke to him.
How did that...
Well, I showed him a copy of my book. It says Theology of the Body for Beginners and a picture of JPII. And he's like, Catholic Church, sex, what is this? And he was with me, well, the Catholic Church put a big guilt trip on us Irish people about sex.
I see.
And Rick Santorum interrupts and he says, Bono, this is not that. You're going to be very impressed with this. And he says, well, I've been thinking about this whole biblical vision that Jesus puts forth about lust. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And Bono says, I've thought, many times, like, okay, if you even look lustfully, you've already committed adultery. And Bono is a real student of the scriptures. Like he really knows the scripture. And he says, I've thought about this, if you even look lustfully, you've already committed adultery in your heart. And he says, and I've concluded there has to be another way to look. And like, Bono, that's chapter 2 and 3 in my book here. And then he says, okay, save sex for marriage, but what about a husband who's sexually abusive to his own wife? Can't you commit adultery in your heart with your own wife? And I said, Bono, the Pope talks about that, and I explain it here in chapter 4. And every other thing he said, as he was trying to unpack his scriptural understanding, could have been straight out of JPII. Every other thing he said was heretical and way off.
Okay.
But it was a lively exchange, and my respect for this man. I mean, you got to think he is one of the most.
He's a rock god. I mean, if you were in his shoes, if I were in his shoes, I would have just destroyed myself, probably. Except for the grace of God,
Exactly. And he has, and I believe him. He says he has been faithful to his wife. He's been married for over 40 years. To one woman. They have 4 kids. They gave them all biblical names. He is a fascinating human being. Again, I don't subscribe to his politics nor a lot of his morality, but I have studied his work. I've studied his life because his music has meant so much to me. All of this because you brought up the Joshua Tree. Yeah. I was 18 years old when the Joshua Tree came out. I was going through one of the darkest times of my life.
There's a photo of him with the glasses.
Oh yeah, there's a photo of JPII with the glasses.
So you were going through the darkest time of your life when?
1987. My family had announced, I grew up in Lancaster, PA. Yeah. My family had announced in March of 87 that they were moving our family from Lancaster, PA to Gaithersburg, Maryland to be part of a Catholic charismatic community there called the Mother of God Community. And I wanted absolutely nothing to do with this move and this community. I was I was 17 at that point. I would have turned 18 that November of '87. And I ended up running away from home, as a matter of fact. My dad had said to me, if you move with us this summer, I'll let you come back and finish your senior year of high school with all your friends. And I had a girlfriend I was very committed to at the time. And the thought of missing out on my senior year of high school was unbearable to me. So okay, that's fair enough. I'll come down with you guys for the summer, and then I'll come back to finish my senior year.
Was his hope that you would like it enough that you might stay?
And I didn't. And halfway through the summer, my dad said, I changed my mind.
Oh.
I don't want you to go back.
Oof.
And I jumped out my second-story bedroom window that night and drove back to Pennsylvania. And I'm making a long story short, but I was basically estranged from my family for about 3 years as they got more and more involved in this community, and I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. It was in that dark time after the announcement of their move. It was one of the darkest times in my young life. I've had other dark times since, but there's experiences you look back on, you're like, that really shaped me. Like that pain that I went through when I was 17, 18, 19, 20, man, that was rough. And it was the Joshua Tree. I didn't have any Christian faith of any kind. I didn't know they were singing about biblical stuff. I didn't know the Joshua Tree meant the Jesus Tree. I didn't know this album had all kinds of themes about the cross and death and resurrection. No clue. But I listened to that in my headphones night after night, and I heard this cry come out of Bono's heart that just gave me hope. It was voicing my own cry. Like we need artists. We desperately need artists who are brave enough to look at the real contents going on in the human heart and then express it, press it out. And that was my experience of that album, of that band. I had been following that band since the early 80s. And Bono is the quintessential man of the O antiphon. He lets out that whoa, whoa. He lets that O antiphon, right? He lets it out. It's liturgical. That O, when we have the O antiphon in the liturgy, it's the syllable we use to express longing for God.
Right.
O come, Emmanuel, right? O come. John of the Cross uses O in his mystical poetry as this voice of longing.
Yeah.
And Bono just has this way of putting that longing into song. I've gone on about Bono, but I have another Bono story. Can I share?
So I got a question for you because you speak at a lot of conferences. You've spoken to probably millions at this point, or at least over 1 million people.
I've never done the math, but I would guess over a couple million.
And so I imagine that when you go and speak at a conference, there are people whose life you have impacted and they really want to meet you. And
yes.
I'm sure you've had the experience where people are lined up hoping to meet you, which is kind of humbling and makes you feel kind of even shame sometimes.
Yeah, it's odd. It's an odd existence to have weekend after weekend over 30 years to have people want their picture with you and wait in line, sometimes an hour and a half.
So these people, when they meet you, they are naturally trying to endear themselves to you in the 30 seconds that they have.
Right.
And they really hope that you'll see them not just as another one, but as someone whose life you have actually impacted. And you want to respect that by eye contact and really trying to meet them.
Yes.
So what was it like you being the one who in that short amount of time had to try to make a real connection?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question because I gave that a lot of thought. Okay, how am I going to engage him? Because he's a celebrity. He meets countless people. And I had been told by Rick Santorum's kind of staff who knew Bono fairly well from lots of meetings with him that Bono loves to talk. And if you pose a question to him that he finds engaging, he will launch. And he said, if you want to engage him, that's how you do it. So I gave that a lot of thought, like, okay, how do I approach this with Bono? And what I came up with was he talks a lot about the difference between grace and karma. Karma is you get what you give out, right? You dish this out, it's coming back around to you. Grace, he says, is about mercy. And you dish out a lot of crap and you expose that and give it to God, and his mercy will meet you, and it won't just come back to bite you because Christ died for our sins. That's Bono's understanding of grace. And so he sings about this in his songs, the difference between grace and karma. He has one song called Grace in particular, where he dives into this. Yeah. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll approach it this way. I showed him a copy of the book, and I said, Bono, what happens if you apply karma to today's sexual behavior? You get the world we're living in right now. But what would happen if you applied grace to our sexual behavior? That's what this book is about. And he did that doggy head tilt.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, I'm on the right foot. I think I engaged him. And that's when he launched into, well, the Catholic Church has been kind of da-da-da-da about in Ireland. And I'll give him that because there's a lot.
Sure.
When you enter into some of that cultural stuff and some of the abuses in the church in Ireland, you got to just show reverence to the wound, you know? So that was my launching point. And from there, I think I already shared that part about the different scriptures he quoted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
I have one more Bono story. Can I share?
Yeah.
So an interview he did maybe 12, 15 years ago, he used in his own language the word Eros, which is a word I use all the time. And he was being interviewed, and this interviewer, I think he was from Rolling Stone magazine, big rock and roll magazine, and he says to Bono, come on, Bono, you're one of the biggest rock stars in the world. You have groupies all around the world who want to have sex with you. You're saying you've been faithful to your wife? And at that point, I think it was like 30 years he had been married. You're saying you've been faithful to your wife? And he says, and come on, Bono, I know you sing about erotic themes in your music. And Bono says, let me try to explain something to you. He says, yes, I do sing about erotic themes in my music. He says, but first of all, when I sing about erotic themes in my music, it's a song of fidelity to my wife. And then he says, but there's a moment in the music for me when the music segues, and then he used the word Eros. He says, and Eros itself segues from the things of this world to the things of another world. And he says, Eros itself in my music becomes a longing for things bigger than this world, for things that transcend this world. It becomes a longing for God. And I remember reading this. I'm like, oh my gosh, Bono, you're on it. You're on it. And then I remembered I had seen a concert clip from a 2001 show that they did at Slane Castle in Ireland. And any mega U2 fan, if you just say Slane Castle 2001, they know this concert. And I showed this clip. Hey, Thursday.
Yeah, I got you. Already on it.
2001.
Got it already.
Okay, bring up where he transitions from All I Want Is You.
We can't play the audio.
Oh, you can't play the audio?
No.
We'll get whacked. You'll get whacked.
Well, we'll get whacked. We also don't have speakers.
Oh.
But anyway.
Okay. Put a link to it for people so they can look it up. But it's the transition from the song All I Want Is You, which is a song of fidelity to his wife, to the song Where the Streets Have No Name, which is a song about heaven. And there's a moment when you can't miss it, when you see first he's singing this love song to his wife, and his Eros is aimed at his wife, rightly so. But when the song transitions from a love song about his wife to a love song about heaven, his desire, you can't miss it. It just goes, boom, shoots like a rocket to the stars, to the infinite. And you see again this O antiphon come out of Bono. And it brings me to tears. Like, it pierces me. It's so vulnerable. It's so naked. It's so raw. And I show this to my students, and then I say, do you know what we just saw here? We just saw Bono teaching 80,000 people how to pray. Because prayer, this is one of my favorite quotes from Pope Benedict XVI. And this is pretty much verbatim from Benedict. Prayer, the fathers of the church tell us, properly understood, prayer is nothing other than becoming a longing for God.
Yeah, Augustine says something similar to that because Aquinas asks the question, is it possible to pray at all times? And he says, well, yes and no. No, because we have all sorts of things that we have to engage in. But then he quotes Augustine in saying that we can pray at all times by constantly desiring.
Exactly. Yeah, Augustine says, longing is your prayer. And if you allow yourself to feel your longing, your prayer becomes constant. If we are in touch with what really is going on in our, and that's hard to be. It's really hard. We numb ourselves, we distract ourselves. It's painful. I don't want to be in touch with that ache all the time because it hurts.
Yeah.
If I just remove the veil a little bit, last night in my hotel room here in Steubenville, Ohio, boom, it hit. Like I'm missing my family. This is the end of a long travel season for me. I'm missing my wife. I'm alone in my bed.
Yeah.
And the ache just started to overwhelm me. And I'm groaning in my... and I'm like, oh crap, I wonder what the next door neighbor might think is going on. I'm alone. I'm nobody's here. And I'm not doing that when I'm alone either. It's a prayer. I'm praying over here.
Steubenville, Ohio. Only in Steubenville.
Only in Steubenville.
Yeah.
Bono, the artists in my life I have loved. And again.
Yeah, you talk about Bruce Springsteen when you were 11 or something.
Please. I'm not subscribing to their politics.
It must be so exhausting.
I know it is exhausting.
Offer caveats constantly.
So there's my caveat. And I will say, I don't care. There are wheat and weeds in all of us, right?
Yeah.
You are full of wheat and you are full of weeds, and so am I.
Yeah.
And you can go to a secular rock concert and find more wheat at that secular rock concert than sometimes you will find wheat at a so-called Christian music event.
Yeah.
There are wheat and weeds in all of us. What we need is discernment. Okay, that's wheat and that's weeds. I'm not going to water the weeds, but I can benefit from the wheat there. And man,
I mean, I know you talk a lot about the importance of desire and you express it so well, but it might be helpful to talk about why it hurts. And it's not hurts in the sense of the gratification that we get from encountering God with our desire, but hurts in the sense of not wanting to engage it. I've shared this story before. Sister Miriam James talks about, sometimes when you're out playing in the snow, maybe as a little child, and you come in and you warm your hands by the fire, and it hurts like hell.
Yeah.
And you think maybe it was better just to stay cold.
Yeah.
And healing hurts.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, effort, this is too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the saints speak of the wound of love. And John of the Cross.
Gosh, you can see why, sorry to cut you off.
No.
You can see why people would rather just a neat and tidy fancy ribbon in my nice leather Bible Catholicism. Can't you see that? God, that's easier.
I may have said this on a previous episode. I can't recall with you. But if you're going to be following Jesus, it's going to be a bloody mess. It just is. Because he was that's where he goes. He says, follow me. And he went to Calvary, and it was a bloody mess. If we are following him, it's going to be a bloody mess.
It's almost like we all start with messy rooms, and you can either pretend your room is clean and not look at it, or you can just kind of get to work. And that sanctification is the Lord, going to work with you on cleaning up your mess. But sometimes we would rather just fixate our attention on a saint or an apparition to somehow avoid the work that we're being called to engage in. Like if I can just read books about Padre Pio and feel a lot of whatever I feel, piety when I think of him. If people are going to misunderstand this, there's no way around it. But or if I can get fixated on a particular apparition, or if I can have a neat little prayer schedule.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry I have to offer the caveat because it's so exhausting, but None of that's to say the call to the saints is bad, that neat prayer schedules is bad. All of that is even necessary to have a prayer. But it doesn't, it does, you can't just clean up your life. It's like a way of papering over the pain that you have.
It can become a mask. It can become. Those pious practices can and oftentimes do in our lives because we're afraid. Exhibit A. We're afraid really to look in there and see what is, actually going on in there. It's scary. And to wear our religiosity exteriorly feels safer. But you can only do that for so long, because if you're not looking at the mess in there, the pain, the brokenness, the sinfulness, the roots of our sins, if I can go back to John of the Cross, he says, as we journey the way of purification, we first deal with the bad fruits of sin in our lives. And God in his mercy, as we've dealt with a lot of those bad fruits, will typically give us a little resting time, a little hiatus, because that's a lot of work. It's a lot of painful work to deal with those bad fruits of sin in our lives. And I know when I had dealt with a lot of those bad fruits in my life, and I was more in a kind of time of, I've made praise, thank you, God, I've made some real progress here. Yeah. And you're kind of floating along, and you're thinking, I'm doing okay. But then John of the Cross says, then we have to look at the roots that caused the bad fruits. And that's a whole other level of purification.
And as you say, thank God for those respites. It reminds me of Frodo on his way to Mordor, right? He gets to stop at that inn and have beer with friends. He gets to go to Rivendell. And in a way, I think those are sort of like the growth. Like I think I'm right now experiencing like healing in my own life from our Lord. And I'm in a place of Rivendell. My wife and I are like, beautiful. Things are good. That was hard, right? But we've both noticed good healing happen. Wow. But then you look up, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, the summit's way over.
No. So there's never a cause for pride because there's always so much further to go. And that can be exhausting.
Can I give you a little hope here?
Please do
all
that.
The listeners? Because I need it. I need to say this. I need to remind myself so that I have the hope too. For the joy set before him, Christ endured those sufferings, right? For the joy set before him. If we don't have our eyes on that ecstasy, what ecstasy? Participation in the infinite exchange of ecstatic love of the Trinity. This is what we're made for. We are made not only to have our sins forgiven, that's just the necessary prerequisite to get to the really good part of why we call the gospel good news. You and I, Matt, are destined to participate in the eternal ecstasy and bliss of the Trinitarian exchange, which is a joy that eye has not seen, ear has not heard, it hasn't even dawned on us. It's the joy that thieves cannot steal and moths cannot come in and eat it up and destroy it. It's the joy that lasts forever. May I pivot, because it's a natural point to pivot to
you
this.
don't have to ask me. You can just do your thing.
We were going to talk about this book that I've written, shameless plug. It's called Eating the Sunrise, Meditations on the Liturgy and Our Hunger for Beauty. And I start the book with a story, just a telling of an experience I had one day when I was actually sitting down on day one of writing the book. And I'm like, how do I start chapter 1? I didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
And I just found myself sitting at my desk in my office, and it was springtime. And I was looking out at a redbud tree in my yard, which in May has all these beautiful buds on it. And why we call it a redbud tree, I don't know, because they're more purpley. But they're in full bloom. And I was just like, And every year I go through this love-hate with this redbud tree.
Yes.
Because the beauty of these redbuds seduce me. But then in 3 weeks, they're dead and they fall to the ground and they're gone. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
And there I am. I'm at my computer thinking, how do I start chapter 1 of this new book? And my mind's drifting, and I'm, friggin' redbud trees, you seduce me with your beauty, and I'm drawn in. But then in 3 weeks, you're going to be brown and dead, and all those buds are going to be on the ground. I hate it. I hate death. I hate it. I hate the fact that your beauty is fleeting. That's what I hate.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I started the book. I was having the experience as I went to write chapter 1, and I said, well, just write that. I just started typing out my experience. And it shaped the whole book. And it became a different book than I thought I was going to write. It became a book on this longing for beauty. And all of this is about what I was saying to you, for the joy set before him. What joy? Infinite joy that's not fleeting. Beauty that doesn't fade. Ecstasy that's not here today, gone tomorrow. A bliss and a joy and a superabounding fulfillment that is secure, that is not threatened by death. Mm. The cry in our heart for that is called, in the language of the church, which is borrowed from the Greeks, Eros. It's the longing for the infinite, true, good, and beautiful. This is why only union with God can satisfy Eros. And if I have my eye on that prize, infinite ecstasy and bliss, then I can look at the sufferings and sorrows that I must pass through to arrive there. And I will be able to say with St. Paul, if I really have my eye on that prize, I will be able to say with St. Paul, I consider the sufferings of this life as nothing compared to the glory to be revealed in us. We have to keep our eye on that prize, or the suffering, forget it. I'm going to numb myself out. I'm not going to feel it. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to repress all that longing on the one hand. That's one approach. Or I'm going to try to fill that longing with all these finite satisfactions, which can never really reach the depth of the ache.
I loved your analogy about the tree. I think what else is painful isn't just that it's fleeting. It's that I know I cannot appreciate it the way I should. Ooh. So if those trees never died, you just start walking past them and not noticing them,
Wow.
That's the pain of beauty too, is I know that I cannot stand and reverence this thing the way I should. I want to take all of it in, but I know I can't.
You can't. Yeah.
And then I feel almost just frustration.
Yeah,
it's frustration that I can't. I had this experience, which I emailed you back before we really knew each other. I was, if you permit me to share it, I was in San Diego. My wife and I were pottering about a little farmer's market on the ocean with two dear friends of ours who we love, Chester and Elisa. And it was just one of these lovely, slow evenings and beautiful, warm weather. And we made our way down to the beach, coffee in hand. And then me and Chester decided to strip down to our underwear and go swimming. And the sun was sinking into the ocean, and we were body surfing, and I just remember thinking, it doesn't get better than this, and it's no way near enough. I think we went home, and my wife and I did what husbands and wives do, and it was glorious, and it wasn't enough. It's not enough. And so I don't know if it's not enough because it's not enough, or if it's not enough because I can't take it all in, but the pain of that.
Yeah, there is a
it's almost like you wish it didn't even happen.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's a danger. I know I've fallen into that danger because it hurts so much to long for so much. It hurts so much to feel so deeply.
And you feel annoying to people around you.
Yeah. Too, and you feel, you start to, you think, am I the only one who feels this? Are there others? And then you read the lives of some others. This is what the saints talk about.
I wonder if you want to read Francis de Sales at some point, because
sure.
I think sometimes we use this language of Eros and you think, oh, this is some kind of
newfangled,
kind of foreign innovation to the faith.
No. This is deep in the tradition of the church. Let me see if I can. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay. In the words of Saint Francis de Sales, Eros. Eros, right? Now we have to do. The reason this is difficult for people
is because you think porn.
Yeah,
You think
you hear the erotic realm is synonymous in the modern mind with the
Eros,
pornographic realm.
I think of a quote unquote adult bookstore. I think Neon XXX. That's what I think. Or
this is what we've been trained.
Or
This is exactly the enemy's goal, is to plagiarize and bastardize the erotic realm. Yeah. Because saint after saint after saint will tell us it is that realm. Think of the Song of Songs, the great erotic love poetry of the Scripture. The saints have written more commentaries on the Song of Songs than any other book in the Bible. Why? What do they know about that erotic love poetry that you and I and the whole world needs to get in on? They know that Eros, the love of man and woman, this longing for union, for consummate union, is what John Paul II calls the primordial sacrament of our eternal union with God. It's the main image the Bible uses. The union of man and woman in one flesh is the main biblical image of God's covenant love with his people, which is why every time in Scripture it says, be fruitful, or it says God wants to establish a covenant with his people, there is a call to be fruitful and multiply. There's a call of the two to become one flesh, because that's the sign of that reality. This is what St. Francis de Sales is getting at here when he uses this language. In the words of St. Francis de Sales, Eros is the desire in us that passionately rushes toward divinization. Okay, now that may be a word. It's more familiar maybe to Eastern Catholics, but maybe less familiar to Western Catholics. Divinization is what we were just talking about, that your destiny and my destiny is to participate in the divine exchange, in the eternal exchange of the Trinity. And so in every Mass, the priest prays, when he pours the water into the wine, he prays, through the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. That's the call to divinization. And Eros, rightly understood, is the longing to participate in that divinization, eternal union with God. And de Sales goes on. May I read this passage from
Please.
On the breastfeeding?
Oh, of course.
Isn't this rich?
Oh, it's glorious. Now, if you said this,
I know.
you'd be accused of being a closet sex addict.
I know. This is why I love to quote the saints.
That's right.
If you have an issue here, your issue is not with me. Your issue is with St. Francis de Sales.
You will lose.
and look what he says. He's talking about the union that awaits us in eternity. He says, what a union of our hearts there shall be with God above in heaven, exclaims de Sales. He goes on. He says, in eternity, after these infinite desires of the true good, which were never assuaged in this world.
Say that again, one line.
After, meaning in the next life. And then he's saying, okay, in this life, these infinite desires for the true, the good, and the beautiful.
Right.
They are never assuaged in this life. They are never fulfilled.
Yeah.
They are never satisfied. And that's why it hurts.
Right.
It hurts because I feel the longing, but the emptiness is not filled.
Yeah.
And Teresa of Avila got to the point in feeling this ache. She said, I die because I do not die.
Yeah.
She's longing for death because she knows on the other side of that is the consummate union, is the fulfillment of that cry. She says, I die because I do not die. And John of the Cross says, when you get into the depth of this cry of your heart, he says it's worse than death. The suffering is worse than death because death is the birth into its fulfillment. But here on this side, the certainty that we are growing in holiness is not that our desires decrease. It's that they expand unto the point of infinitization. And there are times where you feel it so deeply, you can barely breathe. And you long You long, you ache and pine for the consummation. And you feel what the bride in the Song of Songs feels when she takes off all her clothes. She goes into the marriage bed. She's longing for the bridegroom. The bridegroom shows up. He peers through the window. She sees him and she's like, here comes the consummate embrace. And then he turns and he goes. Saint after saint who enter into this imagery of the Song of Songs ask the question, why? And it was Augustine who said, I think he was the first, and I'm sure others, maybe Origen and others. The bridegroom appears to leave. I am with you to the end of the age. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. So it's in appearing that he leaves. Why? Saint after saint has said, to stretch our desire even further, to increase the longing even more.
So he's flirting with us.
Yeah, you could put it that way. Yeah.
You got to finish. We mentioned breast milk.
I did. Here we go. So after these infinite desires of the true good, never assuaged in this world, this is all St. Francis de Sales, we shall find the living and powerful source thereof. In other words, I'm going to find the source of the beauty that I saw in the redbud tree. I'm going to go from the sign to the reality signified. I'm going to go from small b beauty, created beauty, to capital B beauty, divine beauty, lasting beauty. And then this is his analogy. Then, in that eternal fulfillment, truly, as we see a hungry child closely fixed to his mother's breast. Now, notice what he says here. As we see a hungry child fixed to this, it's apparent because he goes into some very intimate descriptions of what a breastfeeding child looks like, that he has seen a child doing this at somebody's breast.
Yes.
So this is what he says. Then truly, as we see a hungry child closely fixed to his mother's breast, greedily press this dear fountain of most desired sweetness, so that one would think that either it would thrust itself into its mother's breast, or else suck and draw all that breast into itself. Then he makes the analogy. So our soul, panting with an extreme thirst for the true good, when she shall find that inexhaustible source in the divinity. And then he can't contain himself anymore. He says, oh, good God, what a holy and sweet ardor to be united and joined to the plentiful breasts of the all goodness, with a capital A. Either, he says, to be altogether absorbed in the breasts of the all-goodness, or to have the breasts of the all-goodness come entirely into us.
Well, that'd be so.
Matt, thank you for your tears.
Don't do that.
Thank you.
Don't comment
No,
on.
I'm commenting, because we need men who are willing to feel it.
Yeah.
As you are willing to feel it right here.
Oh, who couldn't?
Well, here's the problem. We anesthetize ourselves. Because it hurts. Why are tears coming? I mean, it hurts.
Yeah.
You know what the word anesthetize actually means?
I do, because I read your book.
Oh, yes, that's right. Numb to beauty. Numb to beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the root of the two words?
And someone who's an aesthete has a proper aesthetic sensibility.
There you go,
Is someone
aesthetic,
who's a proper appreciation for beauty.
Yeah.
But an aesthetic means you've numbed yourself to beauty.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a practical question here, because we can't be walking around feeling like this all the time. We have things to do. We have laundry.
Yes.
We have business meetings. We have, children who would probably prefer us not to cry all the time.
Yes.
So, I mean, is it that the Lord, is this what a mystic is? Is it the Lord calls certain people to bleed in a way he doesn't call others? Because, but then you've got people like Aquinas who are both mystics and scholars.
Yeah.
Or is it that, he doesn't allow you to feel it all the time?
I think in his mercy, it is a mercy that we don't feel it all the time. I think there are some saints who are granted to feel it almost all the time. Like Ignatius of Loyola was constantly weeping for an extended, like, I don't know if it was weeks or months, but his spiritual director eventually begged him, ordered him, stop crying or you're going to go blind. He just was seeing beauty. It was so raw to him. He was seeing the sacramentality of the world. He was seeing the suffering Christ in humanity. He was seeing the beauty of the resurrected Christ also in humanity. And the beauty and the sorrow, he became a living rosary, if you will. He was experientially living the joyful, sorrowful, and glorious mysteries, and it just made him weep constantly to the point that his spiritual director said, stop, you're going to go blind. So yeah, I do think certain saints are granted what you could call, and I'll quote the Catechism here, as I do here in the book, these are what the Catechism called the extraordinary signs of the mystical life, like the stigmata, or like bodily levitations, or like Ignatius of Loyola constantly crying. These are the extraordinary signs of the mystical life. But the Catechism goes on to say, few are given those extraordinary signs, but they're given them to be a sign to all of us of what all of us are called to in a more ordinary way.
Yeah.
So we're all called to bear the wounds of Christ. Doesn't mean we're all going to get the stigmata as a visible sign. Every time we go to Mass, we say, lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. Well, Teresa of Avila would be up in the rafters as an extraordinary sign of the ordinary mystical life, which is someone who actually means what he says at Mass. We lift them up to the Lord. I mean, I have a priest friend, I think I quote him in here, who once said, if I put a truthometer on my congregation when they say we lift them up to the Lord, we lift our hearts to the Lord, I don't think it would barely register. Because we're just kind of going through the motions. We are called to an ordinary mysticism that I think is the normal Christian life. And that means that we're learning to open our longing. First, we have to feel it and be courageous enough to feel it, and then learn how to open it to the great mystery, what St. Paul calls the mega mystery of Christ's love for the church. That's what makes one a mystic. You're opening your longing to the mystery with a capital M.
Yeah, I guess this is why we turn away from pleasures, earthly pleasures, eh? Like this is why maybe sometimes the saints talk about abstaining from earthly pleasures in a way that rubs us the wrong way, because it sounds like they're saying
they're bad.
Be miserable for the sake of being miserable.
Yeah.
You know, but because gosh, I mean, I remember my wife once noticing me rummaging through the cupboards and asking, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm looking for happiness." You know, like I haven't found it in the chocolate or the whiskey. Maybe it's in this thing,
right?
Which is kind of sad that I knew it and kept looking, but.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter
on that. When
subject.
You go after a chocolate muffin like it might be God, or you go after sex like it might be God, or you go after fill in the blank like it might be God, and makes sense why you do it. You're taking that pain, that longing.
Yeah.
And it's weird how it gets all mixed up and bastardized. Like, I have so many stories I want to share with you, but I don't want to do it live because they wouldn't be understood. It's weird being on YouTube, right? Because our Lord tells you not to cast your pearls before swine. And
didn't I just call you swine?
Yeah, I did. Well, some of you maybe, or maybe I am, and you're doing it to me. I don't know. But like, you know, when you're in person, you can trust, or you can get a sense that, oh, you'll hear this, you'll receive this, but you don't know who's watching. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that is to have your words exposed to an unknown audience.
That's weird.
It's a delicate thing.
But then I guess people who wrote in the 17th century and elsewhere had to risk that as well.
Yeah,
it's not just YouTube.
I think there's a proper veil that we need, and the saints. There's no doubt the saints have mystical experiences that they've not told anybody other than their spiritual director.
Yeah, and a lot of respect for that, eh?
Yeah,
because I guess because the temptation too is that you will accidentally monetize your, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We all have it. Well, you see people kind of capitalizing on emotion or spiritual experience, and you're not sure, but you can see how that would be something you could slip into. But what I was just trying to say, I guess, is like I look to myself as a prepubescent child who found myself so desirous of breasts and sexual delight and things like that, and like not knowing that hunger and that yearning for I know not what, to quote John of the Cross, was good, eh?
Yes.
And you just learn that it's bad because the thing you turn to, the things that you were caught doing, were shamed, and the behaviors are shameful, but you somehow associated the longing with the action and equated the two and thought the longing was bad.
Yeah. That. I've probably shared this quote with you before. I'm sure I have, or if you've read it in my books. But this is attributed to St. Augustine. He says something to the effect, those who are lost in their passions are less lost than those who have lost their passions.
Yeah.
Why? Now, they're both lost. I'm not saying go lose yourself in your passions because you'll be less lost. Well, you'll still be lost. But they're less lost. Why? Because they feel the hunger. And Christianity makes no sense unless you feel the hunger. Christianity is not some dutiful list of rules to follow while you repress all of your hunger and desire. Right? Christianity is an invitation to a wedding feast.
He cannot satisfy the hungry heart unless the heart is hungry.
Amen. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You satisfy the hungry heart. That makes no sense to somebody who doesn't have a hungry heart. The first step on the journey to have Christianity click is to be in touch with the ache. That's why those who are lost in their passions are less lost, because they're in touch with they're taking it to the wrong place. They're taking the hunger to the wrong place, but at least they're in touch with the hunger. And I think this is why the first people to run to Jesus were the sinners, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, because they were in touch. They were taking their hunger to the wrong place, but they felt it. The Pharisees, at least the ones Christ was very firm with in his stern words, were those who had reduced religion to repress what's really going on inside, follow all these rules to the letter, and put on a pious mask. That's who Jesus is most stern with.
I get the temptation to lose myself in my passions. Why is it a tempting thing to reduce religion to a list of rules and put on a pious mask? What is tempting about that?
We were talking about it maybe 20 minutes ago when we said we don't want to feel what's really going on, and it's easier to have just a veneer that I'm a good person, a veneer that I'm doing the right thing without the courage to actually look at the mess inside. And Jesus' challenge is direct. You whitewashed tombs.
Right, that's it.
You're clean on the outside.
Exactly
the tombstone is white, but inside you are full of dead men's bones.
Right.
First cleanse the inside of the cup. Then the outside will also be clean. The temptation of the Pharisee is like, it's the shortcut to sanctity. I follow the rules externally, and then I look good to others, and you get a lot of bennies from that. Right? When people look at you like you're the one who's figured it out, you're the one who got your SHIT together, you're the one who, let me follow you. You figured it out. And I've fallen into that. I'm sure you've fallen. Anybody who's in a leadership role or public role is going to fall into that at one time or another.
I remember once serving with Net Ministries, and one night I ducked into the chapel to say a little prayer, and this pretty co-missionary came in and saw me praying. I took way more delight that a pretty girl thought I was holy than that I was before the Blessed Sacrament. Those things are nice to see and call out, aren't they?
Yeah.
And not to shame either.
Yeah.
Because if you shame them, you'll stop recognizing them.
It's part of our humanity. And to be willing to say, as the little flower did, I have resigned myself to discover new imperfections in myself every day, and in that I take delight.
I love when she says something to the effect of, I should be discouraged at my sinfulness.
Yes.
But I'm not discouraged.
I'm not discouraged. She was falling asleep in her holy hours.
Yeah.
I'm not discouraged because I know that parents love their children even more when they're falling asleep.
Yeah.
And I know that surgeons, to do deep operations, have to put their patients to sleep. So that I'm content now to fall asleep in my holy hour. There's a bold confidence in the love and mercy of the Lord there that is true holiness that the Pharisee cannot understand.
How do we invite people to let go of the pressure they feel to be at a certain place? Because sometimes when we talk about the spiritual life and it's just surrendering to the Lord, and it still feels like the pressure's on me.
Yeah.
And it kind of turns Christianity into a sort of philosophical program to live by in order to find something, as opposed to, as you just put it, to lay on the table and open up for surgery.
Yeah.
How do we? I mean, I guess this in a way is kind of what the Protestants did when they talked about you just have to accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. Like,
and
there's nothing to do. It's just you lay on your back and open your legs. Sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, because that is kind of what it is. If we're going to use
the bridal imagery
analogy, it's all I have to do is open myself
to receive
the Lord's
infilling.
gift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, how do we? First of all, do you understand? Because I'm not expressing myself.
No, I think
well.
I know.
Do you know what I mean by the pressure?
Yes.
Can we ruminate on that pressure?
Yes.
So that we understand what we're talking about.
Remember yesterday when we were filming the Love and Responsibility conclusion of our series, we quoted from a retreat that JPII gave in 1962, long before he was the Pope. And he said, if we put the I must accomplish X first in the Christian life, we have the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
And we put that pressure on ourselves, even to not put pressure on ourselves. Like we get caught in this riptide of, so I'm hearing from the saints like Therese that I'm just supposed to open and surrender. Okay, but now I got to do that. So that's the thing I got to do. There's still, and my confessor has told me, he says, Christopher, every time you go to confession, I want you to confess the sin of self-reliance. And then he said, and the twin tower next to that sin, which towers in your life, self-reliance, the twin tower next to it is self-condemnation. Because inevitably, when we're relying on ourselves, we realize our self-reliance is not reliable. And then, because we think it's supposed to be, we beat ourselves up that it wasn't, and that's the self-condemnation. And we just get caught in this ongoing cycle. What we're doing there, in JP2's words, is we're putting the I must first. And remember, I used that expression yesterday in the series we filmed. We can never really honestly say, I love you, God. We can only say, I love you too. Because, this is the catechism, God's initiative of love always comes first. St. John says it so clearly. This is love. Not that we first loved God, but that he first loved us. And that's why in the spousal imagery, God is always the bridegroom and we are always the bride, because our job is to open and receive a gift.
I got to be honest, I've never had difficulty imagining myself as the bride. I know a lot of men say that. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, it's easier for women because they are a woman. I don't know why that is, but I've
that's awesome. I did struggle with it for a time, and there are still some struggles. And here's what I struggle with.
Maybe it's because I'm not actually visualizing a corporeal act.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
sure,
yes,
if I thought of it that way, it would be weird, but just this, I want to be taken by the Lord. I do. I want...
Can I share a funny story?
Of course.
This dear old man, probably in his 80s, a dear man. He's been to some courses at the Institute, the TOB Institute, and he was struggling with this imagery of being bride. And it was a good lesson for me, because I swim in this imagery all the time. I'm very comfortable with it, but I forget how I had to overcome some weird ideas that were not what the saints mean when they use this imagery when I was first encountering this imagery. And that's the stage where this dear older man was. And he kind of fell into a literalism with the imagery. And he just said to me one day, he said, Christopher, I'm really struggling. And he was so innocent in this. He was not trying to joke.
Yeah.
This was his language. And I'm sharing this because there's a lesson in it for all of us as to how we are to take this imagery and how we are not to take this imagery. The saint after saint talks about nuptial union with the Lord, right? Nuptial union with the Lord. Pope Benedict XVI says, when a Christian prays, he is seeking nuptial union with the Lord. What is the Eucharist? The Eucharist, JPII says, is the sacrament of the bridegroom and of the bride. JPII is so clear. You cannot understand Christianity. You cannot understand what the church is. You cannot understand what the Mass is. You can't understand what our faith is if you don't understand why God made us male and female and calls the two to become one flesh. Because that union in one flesh is a mega mystery that reveals Christ's love for the church. This is our faith. We have to understand the nature of that analogy rightly. It's an analogy. This dear old man says to me, Christopher, I'm just really having trouble with this whole I'm the bride spousal image. I can't picture getting bonked by Jesus.
Oh my Lord. I love his honesty.
I loved his honesty. Truly, I loved his honesty. And it gave me the opportunity as a teacher to go like,
good, please don't.
Yes, please don't.
Please never imagine that.
Don't ever. Don't go. No need. But it was like oh, okay, this is how you're hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to do a little backup here, right? Now, truly, husbands and wives in their union can open what's happening in their marriage bed to a mystical dimension. Cool. This is the invitation. And it can and is meant to be truly a sacramental sign that enables us to participate. I'm just quoting JPII here. He says, the one flesh union is meant to be a participation in the life of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Of course. What else is it?
Yeah,
if it's not that, what would you rather?
Right. But that's scandalous to people because it's like we have God over here and our sexuality over there, and we don't know how to hold the two together.
So how did you help? Did you help him?
Yes, I walked step by step through what we mean by analogy. And I do this in all my books and in all my courses. And I was like, and the more I thought of it, I said, I've said this to you several times, but I get it. It takes a long time for this to sink in, right? And we always have to remember this basic principle. Any analogy, we're zooming in on a certain similarity to make a point, but there is always an ever greater dissimilarity that needs to be honored and respected, right? So long as we understand what the church means by the spousal analogy, we can press into that certain similarity and mine mystical glories out of that.
It's essentially we're made in God's image, not God's made in our image.
That is a good way to put it. And the Catechism is so clear. In no way is God in man's image. God is neither man nor woman. Yet the perfections of man and woman, male and female, he created them. They were naked without shame. That's the perfection of man and woman. Offers us something of a glimpse into the inner mystery of God. That's what it means that we're made in the image and likeness of God. So what is that something, right? JPII spends his entire theology of the body pressing into that something that we as male and female reveal. And it turns out that something is awesome. It's a mega mystery and here's what's different, we might say, and it's important to say and to recognize, of all the images in Scripture, and this is often a criticism of John Paul II, why does he put so much emphasis on the spousal image? Jesus uses lots of images, the shepherd, the sheep, the vine, and the branches. And here's my response to that objection, which I understand at face value. Oh, yeah, good point. Well, let's enter in. None of those metaphors, those are metaphors, vine and branches, shepherd and sheep. Jesus even compares himself to a mother hen who wants to gather his chicks. Those are metaphors. Jesus was not incarnate as a vine, vine in the branches. Jesus was not incarnate as a mother hen. Jesus was incarnate as a bridegroom. And this means the spousal analogy has a pride of place because it's not merely a metaphor, it's a sacramental mystery. And what does that mean? It means spousal love, unlike the vine and the branches, which metaphorically teaches us something beautiful about Christ and the church. But a vine and a branch does not efficaciously communicate the relationship of Christ and the church as a sacrament does. Marriage is a sacrament, which means it really and truly communicates the divine mystery it symbolizes. You can't say that about any of the other images used in Scripture to help us understand God's love. Not even the love of a father and a son. That's not a sacrament. It flows out of the sacrament of marriage, but it's this father-son relationship. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's also very, very important. God has not revealed himself in the Trinity as husband, wife, and child. He's revealed himself as Father, Son, and Spirit. All that needs to be honored. We don't have time to get into all those details. But those are the kind of things, I go into some detail in a book.
Is that but what did you say to him that helped him go, okay?
Yes, I walked him through, I call it the Nicodemus conundrum.
Yeah.
Where Nicodemus, when Jesus says, you have to be born again to enter the kingdom, what does Nicodemus say?
Takes him literally.
Yeah, he's stuck. He's like,
you're telling me I need to get bombed by Jesus?
Yes, you're right. It's Nicodemus going, can a grown man enter his mother's womb a second time?
Yeah.
Now, notice, interestingly, Jesus does not say to Nicodemus, no, you're misunderstanding me. He rather takes him on a journey from the natural to the supernatural, to what, as a theologian, I would say, grace perfects nature. And so Jesus says to Nicodemus in that critical conversation they have, Nicodemus, if you don't understand the natural reality, well, what natural reality? What context are we in? We're talking about regeneration and rebirth of the Spirit, right? If you don't understand the natural reality of generation and birth, you're never going to understand the supernatural reality of regeneration and rebirth. We start with the natural reality, and we go to the supernatural reality. Why was Jesus so fascinated by nature's fertility? Why were so many of his parables about seed and soil? The sower went out to sow seed. Some seed fell on good soil.
Fig trees that don't produce.
Fig trees that don't produce. Pay attention to when to how the wildflowers grow. He says, pay attention to when the trees are in full bloom, right? Like the redbud tree we're talking. He says, pay attention to that. What's going? He's so often referencing what we could call nature's nuptials, nature's fertility. Why? I make the argument in my book here that nature's fertility is the starting point of theophany. And what do we mean by theophany? Whenever you have an encounter of beauty in creation that lifts your heart heavenward, that's a theophany. In Greek, theos phine, I can't say the Greek, but it means to show God, to reveal God. So when small b beauty opens you to capital B beauty, you're having a theophany. Jesus is showing us when he points to seed and soil, and I am the good seed, he says. I am the one who sows the good seed. He's using these nature's fertility, nature's nuptials, if you will, as a starting point for theophany, seeing the world, this would be another way to say it, seeing the world sacramentally.
Yeah, I was about to point to that. It seems like, I think it was often Einstein is quoted as saying, we either see everything as a miracle or nothing as a miracle. I just wrote this down. It's another way of thinking it is either everything is a veil or it's just, I don't know what you'd say, bedrock, like a cement wall forever.
The word I use is, I just lost it. What's the word I use? When you can't see like through it's a thick curtain, like you can't see. I'm losing my brain. Can't find the dang word.
Not an iron curtain, but
no,
something.
it's like opaque. When something is opaque.
Yeah.
You can't, you like stop at the thickness of the curtain and you can't see through it.
So there was just a debate that took place recently between Trent Horn, Lila Rose, a fella called Destiny, and some a porn performer, hey? And I'd recommend you watch it. I wouldn't recommend everyone watch it because it does get into quite, unfortunately, some very visual content, like it's too graphic sometimes. Right. Trent and Lila did masterfully, but it seemed like they were coming at this issue of sex from two different angles, right? Trent and Lila seeing the beauty and the reality and the veil, and the others just coming at it from this atheistic worldview.
Yes.
And when you come at it from this atheistic worldview, you got nothing. Because Lila and Trent were able to get these two unfortunate people to concede in their worldview the legitimacy of animated child rape porn.
Oh my.
Bestiality.
Dear God.
At one point, Destiny said to Trent, so you're saying it's... What did he say? You're saying it's worse to eat an animal than have sex with it? He's like, yes, that is what I'm saying. Right. So bestiality, incest. They had to concede incest, and they had to concede the fact that it might very well be a good thing that a 12-year-old girl be exposed to like violent pornography. And it's like when you get your opponents to concede these things, you win.
Yes.
But they're being perfectly consistent from their insane false worldview.
Yes.
But again, I think that is it a sacrament or isn't it? So it's like if we don't see sex rightly, if we don't see the world rightly.
Yeah. And here, just to make a theological distinction, we have to distinguish between capital S sacraments, there's 7 of them, and small s sacramentality. And by that, the whole world that God created reveals something of the mystery of the Creator. That's what we mean by having a sacramental worldview. Right? I call the little show that I do on the Theology of the Body Institute YouTube channel, I call it the sacramental lens, because I want to teach people to see the whole world with a sacramental lens, right? To see the world this way. This is the Christian life. And you're putting your finger exactly on it, Matt. When you have these two different starting points, you're going to see the world very differently. And you're kind of bringing us right to the crux of what I argue here. Can I pull some stuff out of here? I discovered this in a lecture. A guy, I think his name's not John Lanzelotti. His last name's Carlos Lanzelotti. I forget his actual name, but he was quoting from Wilhelm Reich. And Wilhelm Reich wrote a book called The Sexual Revolution in 1936. And it really is telling. I went back, I found this book, I did some research, and I dug in a little deeper. Listen to this. This is chilling. In his 1936 book, The Sexual Revolution, Wilhelm Reich, that's spelled R-E-I-C-H, stated quite explicitly that the goal of the revolution he wanted to inspire was to replace the religious sense of Eros. We've talked about this already. What's the religious sense? That ache you feel for union is ultimately a desire for union with God. It's a religious longing. It's a longing for God, right? So Wilhelm Reich wanted to replace this religious sense of Eros as a desire for the infinite with the scientific view that erotic stirrings are merely, this is a quote, physical excitations that come from bioelectric processes in the tissues of the body. So where do we go if that's our starting point? Indeed, I say, Reich insisted that what we think are religious yearnings, what we've been calling the ache or the cry of the heart or that O antiphon or eros, rightly understood, Reich insisted that what we think are religious yearnings are in fact, quote, a vegetative function, which man shares with all living nature and which strives for development, activity, and pleasure in the form of flowing, surging physical sensations. End quote. Reich's revolution did not need to fight religion directly, he said. Rather, it just needed to secure what he called, quote, the sexual happiness of the masses. How? Via the findings of modern science. And if we do that, the need for religion, he said, would disappear. See, what he's saying is, all you really want when you feel those stirrings is physical sensations in your tissues.
Isn't this Freud to an extent?
This is Freud. Yes.
Well, religion is a substitute for sex.
There are Freudian undertones and overtones, without a doubt. But Reich foresaw that if we loose erotic fulfillment from the religious longing, and merely provide unfettered indulgence in the pleasures of this world, he said we will be able to prove
that religion isn't necessary.
Religion isn't necessary.
Yeah. Decent hypothesis, disastrous consequences.
Disastrous consequences. And he foresaw them. Listen to this.
This fella who wanted this to happen foresaw the negative consequences?
Listen to what he says. There will be just one problem with this approach to sexual happiness. In the process of attaining it, as Reich himself unapologetically acknowledged, this is a direct quote, the family will disintegrate irrevocably.
Other than that, though.
Other than that, everything will be great. He then casually dismisses any need for concern by naively assuring his readers that any problems arising from the collapse of the family, quote, will be constantly discussed publicly and overcome.
Yeah, by the friggin' government. You're going to need a tyrannical government to fill the role. I found this, I love Australia. I was just there, and I love Australian people. And being back home, their humor, I was like, I found my people again. And I love these people. There's so much good happening in Australia. I was in Sydney. The priests are solid and good men, and Anthony Fisher, great bishop. Cardinal Pell, one day, please God, be a saint.
Yeah.
But in my small town in South Australia, it was like, it became almost a joke because everyone my mother would refer to, bloody so-and-so. Their marriage busted up and everyone was divorced or dead or committed suicide.
Mercy.
But you've got this government now that steps in to sort of supplement what the fundamental building block, once it is obliterated, there has to be compensation to buoy to buoy up the mass. Like, so you look around and everything kind of looks clean and neat, and the roads are nice, and certainly don't look like Steubenville. It's a lot more beautiful than that, in the sense of that you don't have broken down buildings where I live, but it's like just decimation, just suicide and divorce. But just this, it at least appears to me, and this may just be because I live in America now, but this overreach of the government into every aspect of your life. I don't know, Thursday, maybe you can look this up, but when I was a kid, I know that women would get paid $5,000 to have a baby or something like that. And you're like, oh, that's cool. It's like, yeah, but no, it's not, because the husband becomes unnecessary.
Yeah.
Well, the husband's not there, so now the government has to become necessary, and so there's this ever-increasing dependence upon a state.
Yes, when families collapse, just as you said, the government has to step in, and in a kind of tyrannical way. And that is the world we live in right now. It's not some prediction of an apocalyptic future.
Yeah.
But there are great signs of hope. And here I want to quote, his name is Carlo Lancelotti. This is the guy I first learned about Wilhelm Reich from.
Okay.
So this is the hope. In the midst of this tragic breakdown of the family, which has the ripple effect, because what's the fundamental cell of society? It's the family. When you take out that foundation, it's only a matter of time before the whole edifice of civilization crumbles. And we're living through that.
Real quick, why is that the case? Why isn't the individual the fundamental building block of society?
Well, society, the very word, we are social beings. An individual is not a society, right? Society is the coming together of individuals. And the fundamental coming together of individuals is male and female. He created them and called the two to be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
There is no society.
Individuals come from families.
Correct.
Correct. Before families come from individuals.
Right.
Yeah. Marvel is often accused of having really bad villains. I think they should come up with a new villain that just seeks to destroy the fundamental building block of society by pushing free pornography into the homes of everybody. Here we go. 20 seconds of research, says Thursday. We'll cut it later if we're wrong. They had a benefit credit for children. Amount was dependent on income of the household. Yeah. So just in Australia.
Yeah. And on the one hand...
And like, it's hard to be critical of that because, you live in America. You're like, crap, I got to pay 10 grand for a kid and I can't afford this. So I'm not praising the American medical situation either, but...
Yeah, much could be said about that, about how do we, once we're in this bad situation, how do we handle it? What is the responsible use of government funds to fix a bad problem? But the amount of, it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot, or what's the other expression? We're cutting off the branch we're sitting on.
Yeah.
We continue to perpetuate the root of the problem.
Or my favorite, cutting off your head to stop a nosebleed.
Yeah. There's the problem. But here's the hope. Carlo Lanzalotti observes that the denial of the religious sense of Eros is truly paradigmatic of the sexual revolution as an epical phenomenon. And he goes on here. He maintains that the sexual revolution, quote, is not just one phenomenon among many in the world today. Rather, it's the phenomenon that marks our epoch. The sexual revolution is the phenomenon that marks the time we are living in. Right?
Epoch, is that what that is?
Yeah, you would say epoch. We would say epic here in
the good old America.
In good old America, right? But based on Reich's own challenge to the church as to whether the church is right about the nature of Eros as a yearning for God, here's Lancelotti's note of hope. We can also see how the error of the sexual revolution will end. And this is a quote from Carlo Lanzalotti. He says, "It will end by a rediscovery of the full scope of human desire, of the fact that desire that we feel really is a longing for the infinite, really is a longing for God. That mere stimulation of genitals can never, ever reach."
It's funny that we keep putting this car back on the road and expecting it to run. You would think you just have to live 5 minutes or have 5 sexual experiences until you realize, as good as it isn't what you want.
It isn't what
it's not the fulfillment of what you want. Or check this out. Hungary pays couples who get married and pays child benefit based on the salary given up by a parent staying at home. It'd be cool. I think that could be one way that governments could help, is maybe stop taxing families that have over 3 children or something like that.
Yeah.
Massive
there should
benefits.
Obviously the incentive should be towards the family. I mean, again, how do you help a broken situation when it's broken? You have to do something, but still there must be an incentive that incentivizes men and women to become husbands and wives and mothers and fathers. If we don't do that, guess what's over? Civilization itself. Because civilization is the making civil of the relationship of man and woman. How do we make it civil?
It's a good argument for colonization. I know I'm getting into deep waters here, but I really want to explore that more. You've
colonization?
Got, just Christians like England coming into countries and civilizing people.
You're not talking about launching to Mars and colonizing other planets.
No. But
right?
I mean, people get and I know that evil things take place and did take place, but wanting to make people civil. I'm gonna have to do a whole episode on this.
Yeah, how do we renew a culture? You can't renew a culture unless you renew marriage and family life. And you can't renew marriage and family life unless you return to the full truth of Eros. What is Eros? And what we've done in the modern world with people like Reich is we've taken a scientific approach to everything, right? Thank you, God, for science. It's done so much good for us. Thank you, God, right? Another caveat, I'm not in any way down on science. What I'm down on, and what anyone who sees the world sacramentally is down on, is reducing everything to what only science can tell us about it. Right? When you take merely a scientific approach to human sexuality, you will be blind to the sacramentality of human sexuality. And the example I often use here is you remember the old Peter Gabriel song, "In your eyes, the light, the heat, in your eyes I am complete." And then he says, and this is someone who sees sacramentally. He says, "In your eyes, I see the doorway to 1,000 churches." Oh, he sees this woman's body as a theological reality.
Yeah.
Right? We need poets. We need these artists. We need these people with these mystical insights to give us a language, right? To understand these deeper realities. What would happen if we reduced that song to something merely biological? In your eyes, the cornea. In your eyes, the retina. In your eyes, I see the lines of 1,000 bloodshot blood vessels. And I often say, rightly so, thank God for optometrists and all they can tell us about corneas and retinas and blood vessels. But ladies, you know, you want the man in your life.
Even if he's an optometrist.
Even if he's an optometrist, exactly, to see not just your cornea and your retina, but to see the doorway to 1,000 churches.
I wonder if, the rise and fall of the new atheism, right? So Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris and these fellas who sort of rushed in, and I think it was maybe a reaction to sort of like terrorist attacks, 9/11, things like that, and just went, no, there is nothing else. Let's all be adults. Christianity and God it's Santa Claus for adults. Like it's just this, and this is enough, and let's squash it, and this. Even now, I think you're seeing the resurgence of mystery and wonder, the hunger for mystery and wonder through people like Jonathan Pageau or Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And maybe Jordan Peterson's like the gateway drug to Christianity because we've eaten the we've bought into the atheist worldview, and we're tired of that, and now we want wonder, but maybe we want wonder without God. Is that still possible? And it's almost like you got Peterson being the bridge.
That's a keen observation.
And now I really do think you're seeing people desiring Christian faith again.
Yeah.
Even people who say, well, I know it's not true, but I want to act as if it is true. Which is a sad thing. I hope,
I think the bridge, everything begins with wonder, with taking an approach of wonder towards creation. That's the beginning of the sacramental worldview. And also, let's apply it to the question at hand here, human sexuality, how to take an approach of wonder. I quote here from Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, I love him. Well, I love some of his works.
He says, this is great. Listen to this. He says, the origin of poetry lies in a thirst for a wilder beauty than earth supplies.
Yeah.
Right. So when Nietzsche said that modern man, how does he say it? He says, the time is coming when man will no longer shoot the arrow of his longing beyond himself.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in now. But as Lancelotti was saying, you can't repress that longing forever. It's there. It's irrepressible. The longing for a beauty that is wilder than what this world offers is irrepressible.
I'm thinking of, have you ever heard the term hikikomori?
No, I don't think so. It's Japanese?
Yeah. Thursday, you need to look this up for me. And by the way, we're going to be taking questions soon from our local supporters, but do us a favor, ask the question in the locals post, not on the YouTube live stream. So, okay, I hope I got this right. I haven't thought about this forever. Hikikomori. These are people in Japan who are choosing to lead. Man, please look this up Thursday because I could be totally off. This could be like the name of a sushi roll that I've forgotten. But of these people who've decided to live isolated lives where they don't want any interaction with society. So they live in their house. They live on the internet. They stream. They don't interact even for food. The food is dropped off. And yes, did I get it right? Okay, hikikomori, pulling inward, being confined is what it means. Also known as severe social withdrawal. How proud are you of me that I got that right?
That's pretty impressive.
I'm very proud of me. Let's see here. Hikikomori, refers both to the phenomenon in general and the recluses themselves. The concept is primarily recognized only in Japan, although similar concepts exist in other languages and cultures. Hikikomori have been described as loners or modern-day hermits. The difference between them and hermits is they're not directing their Eros to the heavens. Right. Presumably. Estimates suggest that 500,000 Japanese youths have become social recluses, as well as more than 500,000 middle-aged individuals.
That's very scary.
The Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare defines hikikomori as a condition in which the afflicted individuals refuse to leave their parents' house, do not work or go to school, and isolate themselves away from society and family in a single room for a period exceeding 6 months. The psychiatrist, this person, defines hikikomori as a state that has become a problem by the late 20s that involves cooping oneself up in one's own home and not participating in society for 6 months or longer. So this is kind of the defining characteristic of it, I guess. But that does not seem to have another psychological problems as its principal source. Yeah. They also end up dating holograms or video game characters.
Yeah, this is anti-sacramentality. This is the anti-version of the human project.
Wow, man. And you can see, like, we do that in a way now, don't we? I mean, with Uber Eats and Netflix streaming and online pornography.
Yeah.
And it kind of so it has to do with kind of what you're talking about. I thought of the arrow, not shooting it further than ourselves, the sort of solipsistic take of the world.
Exactly. And you can only...
Holy mackerel, look at this. Oh, okay, where are we? What is this here? Replica? Replica is a generative AI chatbot released in November 2017. The chatbot is trained by having the user answer a series of questions to create a specific neural network. The chatbot operates on freemium pricing strategy, with roughly 25% of its user base paying an annual subscription fee. So this is the online girlfriend that we're doing here. Gee whiz, eh?
Oh, okay. Go back a little bit. Many users have had romantic relationships with replica chatbots, often including
erotic talk.
Well, what do we mean by erotic talk? Right. So
sexual talk is what we mean.
Well, they mean. Well, I don't want to surrender the word sexual. Sexual is a good word. They're having pornified talk.
I see.
Right. They're pornifying the sacred. They are bastardizing the erotic. Mm-hmm. The invitation...
Ooh, sorry, I got to look at this. What's this criminal case? In 2023, Replica was cited in a court case in the United Kingdom where this particular individual had been arrested at Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021 after scaling the walls, carrying a loaded crossbow and announcing to police that I am here to kill the Queen. What? Chael had begun to use Replica in December 2021 and had lengthy conversations about his plan with a chatbot, including, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's so absurd. Prosecutors suggest that the chatbot had bolstered Chael and told him it would help him to get the job done. When Chael asked it, how am I meant to reach them when they're inside the castle, days before the attempted attack, the chatbot replied that this was not possible and said that we have to find a way. Asking the chatbot if the two of them would meet again after death, the chatbot replied, yes, we will.
All right. You know what I see this closing in when I say it's the anti-sacramental worldview, because the sacramental worldview begins by opening up and out and looking up at the stars and looking at a tree and smelling a flower and being curious about the natural world. This is total withdrawal from the natural world and total immersion in screens and technology, right? It's the anti-sacramentality. It's the mocking of sacramentality. It's the pornifying of Eros. It's reducing what I want to, as William Reich says, bioelectric impulses in my tissues, right? How do we reawaken wonder at the mystery of sexuality, at the mystery of the universe, and at the pinnacle of the created world is male and female. He created them, right? I quote here from Victor Hugo, the author of Les Mis, the novel from which the musical is based. And I say, okay, let's compare William Reich's language around human sexuality, bioelectric processes stimulating our tissues, with what Victor Hugo says poetically about the wedding night of Marius and Cosette. Listen to this. This was written in the 18...
something?
Thursday. Look up when Victor Hugo wrote Les Mis, 18-something. Listen to this. A little after midnight, this is the wedding night, right? A little after midnight, the house became a temple. Upon the threshold of wedding nights stands an angel smiling. The soul enters into contemplation before this sanctuary.
1815.
1815, he wrote this? Okay, this is 1815, right? Victor Hugo, the wedding night of Marius and Cosette. The soul enters into contemplation before this sanctuary, in which is held the celebration of love. It is impossible that this sacred festival of destiny should not send a celestial radiation to the infinite. Love is the sublime crucible in which is consummated the fusion of man and woman. The one being, the triple being, the final being, the human trinity springs from it.
Okay, sorry, 1862.
Oh, I thought 1815 sounded too early.
Yep.
The story takes place in 1815, written in 1862. That's what, okay, thank you. Yes, listen to this language in 1852. To my knowledge, in the modern era, JPII, in terms of Catholic circles, was the first to daringly say that man and woman image God, the Trinity, not only as individuals, but in the communion of persons.
Is that right?
I believe that's the case. I mean, you can find roots of it in the tradition, but this bold, just saying it, is JP2.
Okay.
But here's Victor Hugo in 1860, whatever, saying the human trinity springs from the union of husband and wife. And he goes on, he says, the lover is a priest. Something of this joy goes to God. A nuptial bed makes a halo in the darkness. That little obscure alcove has for its ceiling the whole heavens. And then he concludes, when two mouths made sacred by love draw near each other to create, it is impossible that above that ineffable kiss there should not be a thrill in the immense mystery of the stars. That's wonder. That's the beginning of a sacramental approach to the mystery of the human body. And it is the healing of the entire mess we are in.
Yeah.
The mess we are in began when we stopped respecting the sacramental integrity of the sexual relationship. That's how we got in this mess. How do we get out of this mess? By restoring a sacramental lens, a sacramental view of who we are as men and women made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah, if you don't know what something is and you don't know what something is for,
you don't know how to treat it.
It can be whatever you want it to be.
It can be whatever you want.
In a way, that's a critique of modern education. If you don't know what the person is and is for, then I guess you could just make him useful.
Yeah.
To whatever end you wish to use him.
Yeah.
Sex is like that.
Inevitably, when we reduce the body merely to the scientific level, and again, praise God for biologists and optometrists and everything we know about the body, thanks be to God. But if we stay there, merely think this is all we are, we will reduce sexual activity to physical sensations that I need to gratify myself, and then others become objects for me to gratify those sensations I desire. In other words, reduce it to the scientific level and stay only there. You inevitably have a utilitarian culture where you are useful if you are
what I want you to be. Or what I
if you
need
are
you to do.
pornographically exciting to me. And I don't even want to say sexually exciting because I don't want to ruin that word.
Yeah.
God made us sexual beings, but he didn't make us pornographic beings, right? To pornify something is to bastardize something good, right? And the enemy wants to pornify, whereas God wants to purify, right? And we must go on that pilgrimage of purifying what has been pornified in our mind if we are to have a sacramental worldview.
What's the verb of sacrilege?
To
Sacralize?
Desacralize?
Yeah.
To desacralize, perhaps?
Yeah. So contraception makes a sacrilege, or desacralizes what is sacred.
Desacralizes the sacramental mystery and integrity of our creation as male and female. Yeah. I mean, it is a direct frontal attack against the sacramentality of sexuality.
Yeah. Wild. Hey, I want to do a couple of things.
Yeah.
This book of yours, Eating the Sunrise, two things I want to let our viewers realize. 20% off?
20% off.
There's a link in the description below. You can get 20% off this book for how long?
We'll put it up for however long. I don't know. We'll just keep it up there. I don't know.
Okay, cool. I want to tell you about a course that I have created for men to overcome pornography. It is called strive21.com/Matt. You go there right now, or if you text STRIVE to 66866, we'll send you the link. It's 100% free. And it's a course I've created to help men, to give them the tools to overcome pornography. Usually men know that porn is wrong. They don't need me or you to convince them that it's wrong. What they need is a battle plan to get out. And so I've distilled all that I've learned over the last 15 or so years as I've been talking and writing on this topic into this one course. Think of it as if you and I could have a coffee over the next 21 days and I would kind of guide you along this journey. That's basically what this is. It's incredibly well produced. We had a whole camera crew come and film this. And I think it'll be a real help to you. And it's also not an isolated course that you go through on your own, because literally tens of thousands of men have now gone through this course. And as you go through the different videos, there's comments from men all around the world encouraging each other, offering to be each other's accountability partners and things like that. Strive21, that's strive21.com/Matt, or as I say, text STRIVE to 66866 to get started today. You won't regret it. And we're back. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling happy to be here with you, Matt.
That's good. So we've got a very vulnerable question here from one of our local supporters. I'm going to sum it up because it's quite long. But this individual was attracted to BDSM, and when he got married, he tried to encourage his wife to engage in some of this quote-unquote play.
Mercy.
It drove a wedge in their marriage. He begged her to try to get involved in some of this stuff.
Mercy.
When this happened, when she became sort of upset with him, when this wedge was driven into the marriage, he fell into porn addiction and writing erotica. This made a deeper wound.
Yes.
This went on for a few years. He said he had a reversion and began working on repairing the damage that he felt, and they began to grow closer. He's been doing much better with pornography. He stopped writing. He's gotten away from the quote-unquote kink community, but those desires are still there. First of all, thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there are many people who struggle with this just in the dark, and they feel so shamed and shameful, they never even bring it out into the light. So the very fact that he's bringing this into the light is the beginning of a deeper healing. And he's already on the road. As there's real grace at work here.
Yeah, let me finish his question. He says,
I thought you had.
How do I know if those desires are sinful or not? The desires are not outside the teachings outlined in the Catechism or the Bible, and I personally feel like they would bring me closer to my wife, but I'm afraid that my reasoning is flawed because the draw of it is so strong that I can logically justify it if I want. What's a good way to delve into this?
Yes.
So I guess we have to talk about two things. We have to talk about things that are within the realm of sexual morality, hey?
Yeah. I want to show a certain reverence here for a deep wound in this man's life. That's where we must begin. Just a reverence for the suffering, and a caveat: I am not a psychologist. I'm a theologian, and this man is going to need some. If he's really going to heal, he's going to need some deep psychological help, some deep therapy. So a counselor who, preferably a Catholic one, who knows about inner healing. Because
I'd point you to Bob Schutz's book, Be Restored.
Oh yes, Be Restored. Absolutely.
Bob Schutz, Be Restored. Please get that book.
Absolutely. Bob Schutz, friend of yours and mine, does excellent work here. And another organization called Desert Stream Ministries They offer a course at the Theology of the Body Institute called Sexual Integration and Redemption. And you can look up on our website to get more info on that. But our sexual desires, even our most disordered ones, and there's no doubt when violence is involved, we have something tragically disordered. Nonetheless, those disordered sexual desires are a window into what's going on in my soul. And oftentimes, those who go for violence in sexual activity are reliving, in some ways, recycling traumas of their lives. I don't want to even venture in more than that because I'm not qualified. It's not my...
Not only are you not qualified, but you don't know this man and he hasn't given you enough to speak specifically.
But I think one can say these things don't come out of nowhere. These desires, they are not natural. They are not God-given. This is not God's intention for human sexuality. To try to wedge it in there in some kind of legalistic, well, it's not outside the bounds of what the Catechism says. This is a justification because he thinks, if I don't want to let go of this because this is a medication for a deep pain in my life, and he thinks it's the only medication that will reach that pain. It is not. The good news is there is real medication that can reach that real pain, but it's going to be really painful. It's going to be taking up the journey that you and I were talking about earlier in this program, where for the joy set before us, we're willing to look, not just put a pious mask over things, not just try to justify the things that I want because it's not technically not in the Catechism, or it's, I can justify it. No. We have to be willing to get utterly naked before God. And this man is already taking some steps there. I'm exposing it, bring it to the light.
Yeah.
But someone far more qualified than I can help this man go on a journey that he needs to go on to face stuff in his soul and in his history from which I believe this stuff comes. And it's going to be dark and it's going to be difficult and it's going to be painful, but the light is going to shine, and this is why Christ came into the world. Redemption is real.
Let me kind of ask a follow-up question. Yeah. What do you say to him or another man who, I'm not referring to BDSM at this point, but who might be with a wife who is, to use the word, sexually frigid and is unwilling to engage in legitimate sexual behaviors, maybe because she finds them objectifying, dehumanizing.
Yes.
Now, she might be wrong in her assessment of why the man wishes to engage in this way.
And she might be right.
She might be right.
Right.
But then you have the man who's frustrated, talk to that.
John Paul II, in Love and Responsibility, talks about the need for a culture of marital relations. And by that, he says, the world of the man is a different world than the world of the woman. And the world of the woman is a different world than the world of the man. And this makes establishing harmony in the marriage bed a real challenge. Every married couple can attest to this challenge. And what is needed, he says, the key to marital harmony is tenderness in approaching the otherness of the other's world. Where I say, okay, my wife is different than I am. There's another world over there that is not my world and I don't understand it, but I'm going to trust that it's meant to enrich me. My world is different from her world, and I'm going to open it up to her, trusting that this could enrich her. Now, it doesn't mean everything that's in my world as a man is going to be wonderful and beautiful, because I'm a broken man. And I might be seeking to justify all kinds of things sexually or that are actually degrading to my spouse. So we can't just say, well, it's in my world, you have to respect it. No, we have to submit our world, our inner world, our desires, also to the truth of God's plan for sexual desire. And the blueprint for that is in the beginning, right? In the beginning, they were naked and felt no shame. Why were they naked and not feeling any shame? Because they experienced sexual desire as God created it to be, which is the desire to be a true gift to the other. Right? JPII says the key here to harmony in that tenderness of entering the other's world and trusting that at the depth of that other's world, behind whatever might be broken or sinful or disordered, there's also a treasure. And I want to go on a journey to find that treasure and honor that treasure. And he says the key here is to recognize that the other is more important than I am. Not that I'm not important, because the other will also be saying the same of the other. It's like, that analogy of heaven as the long forks, where you can't get the fork to feed yourself, but the person across from you can feed you.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. If both people are doing that, trusting that there's a world over here that I need to learn and discover, and it's going to challenge me.
Thinking of Paul's words of mutual submission for the sake of Christ.
Boom.
Yeah.
That's the proper sense of what that is. Mutual submission out of reverence for the mystery of Christ and the church that is revealed in you and that is revealed in me as a man, as a woman. Finding that, going on that journey, and I like to say, like a man's inner world is like a deep cave, and the woman who goes on that journey has to be a spelunker, a cave explorer, right? But he also has to open that freely. She can't go poking around in there if he doesn't open it to him, open it to her, because that would be a violation. And her inner world is like a deep ocean, and his mission is to go deep sea diving into that world. But he can't go swimming into her depths unless she opens them freely, or that would be a violation. So what is needed here is trust, vulnerability, tenderness.
I'm no psychologist, and so maybe I'm wrong here, but I think I'm right. That I would imagine that a woman's, I know a man could be possibly frigid, I guess, but a woman's frigidity, like the one that is like, no, this needs to be healed. This is not good.
Yes, it's not good.
That you viewing sex and sexual relationships with your husband in this way. But I imagine that begins to heal as the woman begins to trust.
Yes.
The woman has the woman can legitimately trust if the man shows himself trustworthy.
Yes.
And I imagine as she allows him into that deep ocean, to use your analogy, in the sort of psychological way, then bodily there'll be an openness there that wasn't there prior.
Yeah, you're in your own words, you're saying exactly what JPII says in Love and Responsibility. He says, frigidity in a woman may sometimes be her own issues that she brings to the table. But it may also be, and maybe even often is, the result of a certain lack of tenderness on the man that he calls brutality. Yeah. And there are different grades of brutality. I mean, a man can be brutal with a woman in a really brutal way, but even like there's an emotional brutality, you might say, where you just dismiss that other world, and you're really demanding that she be more and more like you. I know I've done that to my wife, because wouldn't that be easier if my wife just thought like me and I didn't have to go on that pilgrimage into her world? And I remember one situation in our marriage where there was lack of harmony and something we were dealing with, and I kind of was like angry about it. Like, why does she just think more like me? And I realized, well, that would make her a man. And there's something homosexual about it. And I can when I'm in those places of like angry at the difference of man and woman, I can begin to say, I think I get something of why men might prefer a man, because there's no other world. Yeah. It's just my world, and you have pretty much the same world, and we can selfishly feed off each other. But I need the otherness of that world for my masculinity to flourish, to become what it is. Otherwise, I'm going to be what we were talking. What's that name for those isolated? Oh, hikikomori. Those people. The isolation of sameness, otherness. That other world, that deep ocean, calls me out of my cave, and there are treasures in that ocean that I am called to discover in my wife that she doesn't even know about. Yeah. And there are treasures buried in my cave that she's called to discover. Joy. If we are willing to go on that vulnerable journey of exposing our hearts.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. Alex says, Christopher, my dad is a big U2 fan, but he's a non-Christian. Can you give me some specific songs or lines from songs that can help me build a bridge with him? I'm sure you've never been happy to receive a question.
Oh, that's a great
what
question.
A softball.
Sure. How about, let's start with the song Grace. Go to the song Desire. Go to the song Where the Streets Have No Name. go to the song October, go to the song Scarlet. Scarlet on the October album is one of my favorite U2 songs. It's just a hymn. It's a hymn that's just rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. Go to the song, well, there's a short list. Start there.
Yeah.
And do some there's some good books out there about the kind of Christian roots of U2, and you can do a lot of reading.
That could be a nice Christmas gift.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
Get them, what's one of the books? The Gospel According to U2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Kyle says, what are some common mistakes you see people making in the theology of the body realm? And what's the remedy for those errors?
Yeah. I'd say the most common mistake is to reduce John Paul II's theology of the body merely to something for marriage prep or a chastity talk. Oh, that's for married people. Oh, that's for a chastity talk. That's for, to reduce it to reduce it to that. Is it great for marriage prep? Absolutely. But guess what? It's great for baptismal prep. Why? Because what John Paul II is giving us is a sacramental worldview. Mm-hmm. And this is the beginning of Christianity. This is not the end point of Christianity. This is the beginning of Christianity, coming to see the world as God made it to be. To have that sacramental worldview, to reduce what John Paul has given us merely to something that belongs in a sexual ethics course or a sacramentality of marriage course in a seminary or in some institute of theology is to miss the broad scope of what he's given us. What he's giving us is theological anthropology, a proper understanding of what a human being is. So what we say at the Theology of the Body Institute is theology of the body is humanity 101. If you have a body, this theology applies to you.
Yeah, if you don't, move along.
You move along.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, sometimes when you hear people teaching the theology of the body, I'm sure you try to be humble, thinking that, okay, maybe they're seeing this through a different facet, and who would you say, like if someone was to learn the theology of the body from you, who is somebody else you would like them to learn it from, where presumably they're not saying the same thing as you? They've got a different spin on it, but it's still
which direction do you want to go? Do you want to go the more scholarly direction or the more...
Let's do
okay,
both, yeah.
If you want to go in the scholarly direction, Mikhail Waldstein, he and I worked together on the English translation. I'm not a language scholar, he is, but he wanted to run it all by me because I was one of the main guys trying to get it out there. So we had a lovely, lovely back and forth, and I don't know how many doctoral degrees he has.
I think at least 3.
And he actually directed my doctoral dissertation, which was a tremendous gift. But he, in terms of scholarly work on the theology of the body, I'd point people in that direction. In terms of a more popular approach, I'd point them to Jason Everett. I'd point them to...
Jason Everett's got a little book called Theology of the Body in an Hour.
I'd point them to Katrina Zeno. Okay. I'd point them to an organization called the Theology of the Body International Alliance. I'd point them to an organization called TOB, Theology of the Body Evangelization Teams.
Good.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
And everybody comes at it with a certain nuance or different perspective that will enrich them. If you like my approach, take advantage of all the stuff that we do. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of other teachers out there too.
Francesco says, you talked about the need we have for healing, even if it hurts like hell. Where can we start from? I have an answer. Where we are too afraid to face the wounds that keep us paralyzed. Another shout out for the John Paul II Healing Institute, run by Bob Schutz down in Tallahassee, Florida. He runs weekends around the country and more intensive things than that. Did I tell you about my experience?
You've told me that you have been, and it has been incredibly healing.
Oh, do you mind if I tell you a bit?
Please.
I was in Australia visiting my family, and the Lord was just doing something. I didn't know what it was, but it was frightening. I was, reading spiritual authors from books that I had in my house in Australia that I hadn't read in a while, and just the Lord was very near, and I could sort of smell him. And it was just, he was very present, and things were opening up in me. And this one day, I lost my stuff at one of my children. I just lost it. I was driving, and we were all in the car, and I missed my exit, and I think I felt embarrassed. And dude, when I say I lost it, I mean, if there was a camera in that car,
I've
people
been
would,
there.
yeah, it was so embarrassing.
Yeah,
dude.
I've been there.
And I was so ashamed. And I pulled this person to me after, of course, and I begged their forgiveness. And I told them it wasn't their fault and all of that, thank God. But it was about that time that Sister Miriam James, she shot me a text and asked me if I wanted to come on one of these retreats. She'd asked me before, and I was busy. But she asked me in that vulnerable state, and I'm like, yes. Now, it was to happen 3 days after I got back. So I share this because I really want people to take me up on my invitation to check out Bob Shoots. So I arrive home, and about 3 days later, I drove to this maybe 4-night, 5-day sort of intensive. What is it called? Restoring the Glory.
Or is it healing of the whole person?
Yeah, healing of the whole person.
Yeah.
Weird things were happening. I remember, and only you will understand this, and 5% of our audience, the rest will be very offended and confused, I think. But all the weirdos out there will understand us. I remember I was on my way to the retreat, and I stopped off at this Whole Foods place, and I was in the parking lot, and I saw this woman, and she was putting her groceries into the car. She had very short shorts so that I could kind of see the under part of her buttocks, and I just wept. I don't know why I wept. I don't know if it was beautiful. She was beautiful. But it was something going on. I'm like, why am I crying over this woman's bottom? That's a strange thing. And then I sat down. Here's what was weird, right? There's nothing manipulative about the conference. If anything, they could have tried a little harder. We were in a basement with fluorescent lights, and I forgot that I was a known Catholic. I didn't realize that people would be coming up to me.
Right.
But I just couldn't stop crying. And I'm like reading the Bible, I'm just weeping, and I didn't know why I was weeping. And people are coming up saying hello. I can't talk to them, and they go, okay, and they leave. And Sister Miriam came, and I'm like, I felt like the Lord was inviting me to be a body on a surgeon's table, and that I didn't have to try. And when I say didn't have to try, I mean that at times I just checked out and was just checking the internet. Like, I actually put zero effort into this course.
And there was still fruit.
I showed up late one day because I was tired and I didn't want to go. And the Lord just beat the shit out of me.
In a good way, I hope.
That's not what I mean. What did he do? The Lord just cut me open and put me together, and scales fell from my eyes, and my frostbitten hands were healed, and my body began to feel again. And it was like I was waking up from a coma, and I was taking everything in, and it was too much.
Beautiful.
So many days I just walk out and weep.
Yeah, that's a sign that real deep surgery is going on.
And then what was weird, and this is why I believe the stories of the saints, of which I'm not yet but will be, because I tasted it. I would walk around seeing people's spiritual warfare. I didn't even know them, and I'd see what was going on in them, and I just heard for them. Yeah. All of that. Why am I saying all that? It's just to say
someone asked, how do you begin the healing journey?
Healing's possible, and healing begins when you encounter the Lord who loves you, and So go to Bob Shoots.
Yeah, and their podcast, Restore the Glory.
Restore the Glory.
Bob Shoots and Jake Kim.
Yeah,
both dear friends of mine. They have this beautiful podcast. You've been on it. I've been on it.
Yeah. Please listen to that podcast.
Listen to that podcast. Yeah.
Thursday, if you don't mind putting a link to Restore the Glory. Because I tell you what, if Jesus is not like Sister Miriam or Bob Shoots, I don't want to know him. They are the most just beautiful
they have
people.
the tenderness of Christ.
He helped me so much when I moved here. I was in such a desperately bad place.
Thank you, God, for Bob Shoots.
I've shared this story before, and I don't mind sharing it again, even though it's embarrassing. He texts me because he wants an endorsement for that book. Mm-hmm. I just moved here. I was so fried, dude. Yeah. I was so unhappy. Cameron was hospitalized 3 times within like the first 2 months of us being here. We didn't know what was going on. It was winter. The kids were adjusting. And he texts me and he's like, how you doing, Matt? And I said, I just want to smoke pot and listen to Radiohead. That's it. That's all I want to do.
Honesty. Healing begins with honesty like that.
And he said, well, we should maybe get together and pray. All right. And so we started meeting weekly for like an hour at a time, just praying. Jesus is so faithful and he's so good.
Yeah, and I'll just endorse everything you said about Bob. He has come along my side in some very, very tender, painful moments of my own journey, and been a tremendous guide. Tremendous guide.
So all of that is to say, you don't need to know what you need to work on. It's almost like if you were trying to make flowers grow and they were all seeds in the ground and you didn't even know where they were. What do? Well, you just water it and you give it sunshine. We don't know what needs to grow within us and what needs to be pruned within us. So you just expose yourself to the good God.
I'll tell you this, the starting point of my adult journey into a deeper healing, and you're on it your whole life, you can never say, I've arrived, I'm healed, was coming face to face with the pain that my own broken humanity had caused my wife. Despite all my best efforts to love her, I was the TOB guy. I was the guy who's going to get this right. And
I want you to delve into this because you've told me that prior to your marriage, you were no longer looking at pornography. You were no longer masturbating. This is not something you're dealing with. Because I think a lot of men, when they think of the wounds they're inflicting on their wife, it's their own kind of shameful side behavior. So what, if you don't mind me asking, what was it that was hurting your wife?
2005 is when I began to look more honestly at the pain I was causing my wife. We'd been married for 10 years. And I came to realize I was 35, 36, and I realized with the help of this very beautiful, wonderful spiritual director who I'm still seeing, I've been journeying with this beautiful priest for almost 20 years. I had to go on an archaeological dig, so to speak, to find the roots of pain in my life that I was unwittingly and sometimes wittingly dumping on my wife. Why do we cause people pain? Because we're in pain. Why are we in pain? Because other people caused us pain. Why did they cause us pain? Because they were in pain. Someone has to stop the cycle of wounded people wounding people by being willing to take the punch and rather than punch back, return love. And that's what the cross of Jesus Christ is. This is where he absorbs the punch of the whole human race, so to speak, absorbs it in and doesn't punch back, but returns, forgive them, Father, they don't know what they're doing. I am blessed to be married to the kind of woman who, not that she didn't have to work through anger and rage towards a husband who had really hurt her, but got to the place with the help of good spiritual direction where she could realize my husband's hurting me because he's hurting. And she realized I can offer the pain he's caused me as intercession for his healing. That's the Catechism says this. This is one of my favorite paragraphs from the Catechism. You want to begin a journey of healing? Go to Catechism 2843, where it talks about the inability for us to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those, and how difficult it is to live that out. But the Catechism says this: the heart that offers itself to the Holy Spirit opens the pain, that's the context, opens the pain we're in to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit will transform that pain into compassion. How can I have compassion for the person who hurt me? Only the miracle of the Holy Spirit can do that in a human heart, where I come to realize the reason I'm in pain is because you're in pain. You've dumped your pain on me. The pain I feel is the pain you feel. Guess what? We feel the same pain. Guess what? That's called, open to the Holy Spirit, that's called compassion, to suffer with. And then the Catechism goes on to say, Catechism 2843, that the Holy Spirit will transform the memory of the pain into intercession for the person. Wendy was doing this for me. She didn't know that catechism quote. This was what she was experiencing in her own prayer. She was doing that for me. And she didn't come at me with the pain I caused her with a punch back. She came at me with mercy. And that softened me. That enabled me to see her pain and to see that I was causing it. And to say to myself, why am I I wanted to love you, but I've hurt you. I wasn't an total asshole. I mean, I could be on occasion, but this was just the rotten fruit of a deep root of pain in my life that I had to go on the dig. And what I discovered through lots of digging with my spiritual director, and he always says this: Go within with him. Never poke around into what's going on way down in there on your own as if you can fix it. Go within only with him. This is what a good counselor can help you do. This is what a good spiritual director can help you do. Go within with him. So Jesus, I really believed in my prayer, was leading me into these memories of being really rejected deeply and painfully by my older brother when I was a kid. And just defenses that I built up in my life to protect myself from a constant barrage of...
Would you mind if I ask you, and if it's too personal, please don't tell me, because it's quite sensitive and I'm honored by your sharing. What was it you were doing to her? Was it anger? Was it manipulation? Was it criticism?
Here's what I was doing.
What was...
I have to go back to... This all comes out in spiritual direction and deeper prayer life. That I got to this point in my life where I had to be as cool as my brother. My brother was the cool kid in the neighborhood. And in order to win my brother's approval, I have to kind of just step in line. I have to listen to the right music. I have to have the right bike. I have to wear the right clothes. I have to be as cool as my brother. It became this idol of coolness in my life to win my brother's approval. I have no idea when I get married and I'm 26 that this is just the way I see the world.
Yeah. And if somebody had suggested to you, you're just trying to be cool for your brother, would you have understood that?
No, I would not. I had to go on that archaeological dig in spiritual direction and prayer to come to understand that this is a deep problem in my life, that I've made this idol of cool. So Wendy comes into my world in my mid-20s. She's not a cool kid. And I remember the pain that she felt when looking at childhood pictures of her, when I realized, oh, geez, if you and I had been in the same school, I never would have invited you to my 8th grade party. You weren't cool enough. You were one of those uncool kids, whatever your categories are, right?
So did you sort of resent her for that and try to make her cool?
Well, I loved her for it. I mean, first of all, I loved her for it because way down in there, she doesn't believe the same lie that I believe.
Yeah.
She's been liberated from this lie. And her love is going to save me from this lie too. Way down in there, I was so drawn to her because she was a free woman.
Yeah.
She was free.
And she certainly wasn't asking you to be the kind of cool you thought you had to be.
No. And so I was simultaneously, this is the solution to my own neurosis at some deep level. And at the same time, I'm scared to death that you're that free because I'm bringing you into my family. And my brother's going to reject the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Because you're not cool, just like he did to me.
Yeah.
And it was a desire that was really messed up, but really what I wanted to do was save her from the pain that I endured at my brother's hands. That's what I wanted to do. But what I ended up doing is causing the pain from my own hands, because the way I tried to spare her the pain that my brother caused me was, well, Wendy, if you want to be lovable in my world, you got to listen to this kind of music. You got to ride this kind of bike. You got to wear these kind of clothes. And what's the message Wendy's receiving when I'm subtly and sometimes not so subtly taking her to cool school?
Because, I mean, I get that you said that at a deep level you loved her for that, but, people talk about how parents kind of resent in their children what they see in themselves. Was there also a kind of a resentment at the same time?
Yeah. There was a
trying to fix.
I need to educate you.
And not just when you're around your brother, but in life, presumably.
I need to educate you to be as cool as I am. Who's the idiot here? Not my wife. I am. And my taking her to cool school, what's the message? Does my husband love me? Why is he trying to shape me into something I'm not? Well, the reason I'm trying to shape her into something I'm not is because that's the way I coped in my own life with my pain. I had to be something I wasn't in order not to be rejected by my brother. Because the real me was the weak dork little shit that my brother constantly emotionally rejected.
Mm-hmm.
I was so afraid that Wendy was going to experience that I did that to her so she wouldn't. Well, does that make any sense? No, but in some way you can understand why I would think that would be the approach to spare her that pain. The net result of all of this, from a wife who took that pain and instead of punching me back, learned how to open it in intercession for me, was the beginning of a healing journey that took me into my pain that I realized originated a lot, not all of it, but in this emotional abuse of my older brother. Well, guess what? Now I'm learning to turn my pain into intercession for him. And it's opened up incredible doorways into healing that's still underway and may take a lifetime. Who knows? But
did you ever chat with your brother about
this? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
yeah.
the fruits of this, it's still ongoing.
Yeah,
it's still ongoing. It's but I've seen beautiful.
Doesn't
growth.
this just go to show? Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Doesn't it just go to show that our individual paths to sanctity are going to look so different?
Yeah.
But if you were to try to impose your path of healing onto somebody else, you have no way. Like, people are so complex, and so different.
And we're unique in our journey. You can say, oh, there's certain. This is why it's good to tell our story, because there's elements of it that it
makes people feel less alone.
Yes, you are not alone in your pain. You're not. And we all need to know that, because the aloneness in the pain just causes us more pain.
So when you began to find healing, did you just what happened? Did your wife feel more freedom to be herself, or?
Yes. She started. This was just one of the fruits. I could point to many, but she started listening to her music again.
As crap as it is, I'm just joking. Sorry,
but that was the arrogance that I had. That was the arrogance I had.
Yeah.
To I didn't ever use those words, but that was the message.
Don't listen to this.
Don't listen. That's medicine for her soul.
Yeah, don't take your medicine.
And what I'm really saying, my family's going to reject you if you listen to that kind of music.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to be rejected. So don't listen to that kind of music. Yeah. But what did I just do? I just rejected her for listening to that kind of music.
Yeah.
I just did to her what I didn't want my family to do to her.
Yeah, and you made your family the standard of truth.
Yes, exactly.
You kind of confirmed in your own mind that what their judgments were accurate.
Yeah. And the pain that my wife endured coming into my family culture was really, really painful.
If you don't mind me, your wife told me that your sister apologized to her.
Yes.
I hope that's not too personal to share.
No. My dear sister Emily died 2019 from cancer, and my sister didn't like this Wendy Weidman coming into the West family. And she was very close to me, and I think there was some, she didn't like some other woman taking me out of the family, and now I'm spending all my time with this other woman, and sibling stuff. And my sister Emily was not kind to Wendy when Wendy came into the family. Like 4 or 5 days before she died, my dear sister Emily was in tears, apologizing to Wendy.
Yeah.
For the way she had not. She said, I crushed a little bird.
That's right.
I crushed a little bird. I crushed a little bird, my dear wife. Mercy is real. Mercy is real. Healing is real. We are not alone in our pain. Jesus knows your pain. He knows my pain. And he has promised, and this is the miracle. This is his promise. Wendy is going to shine for eternity with far more glory than had I never caused her that pain. That's just the promise of the gospel. Does that mean I should cause her more pain? Should she shine with more glory? St. Paul says, if that's the way you think, your condemnation is deserved.
Yeah.
Right. No, but God will bring flowers from wounds.
Or dung. Yeah.
And there's the manure is part of the journey. But that's a great image of fertilizing, right? We got to look at our dung. We got to look at our pain. We got to look at our wounds. But the Lord can and look at it. This is the symbol of the wound of sin, right? The open side of Christ. What flows from the wound of sin? The redemption of all sin. The very infliction, the very imposing of all of our pain and sin and broken humanity on Jesus, who Scripture says he became sin who did not know sin. The very wound that we inflict becomes the fountain that brings the healing we need. I mean, that I have experienced that in my own journey in married life, that the very wound I've caused can become also opened to Jesus. And the very wound that has been inflicted on me by others, opened up to Jesus, can become a font of redemption for the very people we've wounded. It's real. It's real.
Thank God. Carbite asks, how does God...
I forgot we were in a Q&A session.
Yeah, well, this fella asked about healing, and that got me onto my story. But Thursday thinks that this is way better than questions anyway.
Oh, good.
But how does God purify something pornified, as Christ said, asks Carbite, looking specifically for the physical facet, as spending time in sexual sin caused psychological damage. So what's he saying here? Just as porn caused psychological damage, like then what's the thing to begin purifying the pornified?
Well, can I have one of those pieces of paper? You've seen me do this 100 million times. I need a blank one. Sorry.
That's all right. If I had cash on me, I'd give you that.
No, here we go. See, I carry a tablet with me because I do this so often.
That's right.
Visuals are helpful, right? And let's start with a principle that is absolutely bedrock, foundational Catholic cosmology. And by that I mean, if we don't understand this, if we get this wrong, we have the whole cosmos wrong. We have the whole universe wrong. Here's the principle. The devil does not have his own clay. What does that mean? Everything that is created, all that exists, was created by God, and God looked at everything he made and said, behold, it is very good. Here's my visual. Suppose this is a painting. This is a painting of man and woman naked without shame. This is the pinnacle of the goodness of all of creation. Behold, it is very good. There is nothing more beautiful than man and woman naked without shame in the beginning. Nothing. This is the crown of creation. The enemy hates this painting. Why? Because this painting is the main icon or window to the heavenly mystery of the Trinitarian exchange, right? The destiny that we all have, which is the marriage to the second person of the Trinity, so that we can be taken up through the marriage of the Lamb into the inner life of the Trinity. This is the earthly sign of that heavenly reality. That's why Satan hates with all his diabolic fury this painting. And what happened with original sin to the painting is that clay, that very good clay, got all twisted up. This is the nature of evil. It's the distortion of something good. The devil doesn't have his own clay. There's no such thing as evil in itself, meaning evil does not have isness. It does not have existence. It's the distortion of something good. The good and existence are the same thing. If it exists, it's fundamentally good, right? Even Lucifer is a fallen angel who God created good. And because he has fallen, he now wants to get his hands on all the goodness that God has created. And this is porn right here. Porn is the distortion of that original beautiful icon. How does this get redeemed? Here's the mistake we typically make. Oh, it's been pornified. That's bad. That's evil. Throw it away. Right? Now we think spirit good, body bad. This is heresy. We've given the devil his own clay. That crumpled painting does not belong to the devil. It belongs to God. It's been crumpled. The redemption is not the throwing away. The redemption is Christ coming into this mess. This is an image of our hearts, right? See, what most people do, we were talking about this a long time ago on this episode, the Pharisaical approach is stuff, don't look at that, because that makes me unholy and unlovable. Put on my religious mask and just follow the external rules. And Jesus says, whitewashed tomb. You're not looking at what's really messed up. You bury it. You refuse to look at it. Christ wants to come into the dead men's bones, into the depth. And this is that interior journey, that archaeological dig. We're like, oh, shit, that's really effed up. I'm really effed up.
I can't have people see this.
I can't let people see this. I got this impression growing up as a kid, because this was just our family culture. Hide your weakness. Hide your imperfection. That makes you unlovable. Bury it. Don't look at it. Hide it. You're a blemish on our family record. Hide all that. And I got the impression, to please people, I got to hide all that. What happens when I do something wrong? There's an emotional distance now between me and my dad. I don't like that emotional distance. So I can't let my dad know that I've done anything wrong. I got to hide it. Got to hide it. Got to hide it. Misericordia is the antithesis of that. Mercy. Misericordia, a heart that gives itself to those in misery. I'm in misery because I got this twisted, crumpled up thing deep in me. And to bury it, I'm just going to be in more misery. What does misericordia do? Misericordia is attracted to that. The mercy of God, the crucifixion of Christ, is precisely God himself entering into this.
And as soon as he does, what is our response? Get away from me,
Lord.
I'm a sinful man.
I'm a sinful man. Exactly. Everyone on the journey has to overcome that initial understandable reaction. You will never wash my feet.
Yeah.
Peter, if you don't let me wash you, you have no part of me. Okay, then wash me all over. Right? I love Peter there.
I love him so much.
So we all have to let Jesus into the pornified reality. And we can say pornified here, not just our sexuality, but any aspect of our humanity that's been twisted, where that clay is distorted. We got to let Jesus in. And what's the miracle? We're loved right here. We're loved right here. What was the first result of original sin?
Hiding.
Why? I'm afraid because I'm naked. So I hid myself. The journey of the Christian life is the reverse of that. I was at peace because I knew he loved me. I trusted in his misericordia, that he's actually drawn to me here in this miserable, crumpled up mess of my broken life. So I exposed myself. I exposed myself. I exposed my misery. I exposed my pornified understanding of the body. I exposed it to the light. And what happened? The light came in, and this miracle is now underway in my life, where my broken, twisted, fouled up, pornified view of things is now becoming more and more purified.
It reminds me of the blind man who began seeing trees walking upside down.
I can see.
Yeah.
But people look like walking trees. Okay, touch me again. Yeah. And that's the journey. Beware the false summits, as we were talking about earlier, right? The false summit in the mountain climb is you get to the certain section and you think, oh no, the summit's over there. And guess what? When you get there, you're going to realize the summit's over there. So keep going, keep going. It's not an easy journey. It's not for the faint of heart. In fact, this is why the temptation to externalize and just make it about external following of rules is very tempting and attractive. John of the Cross is very clear here. He says, most Christians stop the journey when the painful purifications come and they externalize it. It's a real temptation. Keep going. Be not afraid. Keep your eye on the ecstasy, and you'll be willing to endure the agony that it takes to get there. And as if I've arrived. No, I've not. I'm just a man on the journey. I can look back and say, wow, I've come a long way, But I look ahead and I say, man, I got a long way to go.
Yeah, and if it weren't for manna or bread for the journey, it would be too exhausting.
We would pass out.
Who was that? Elijah? Or who was that?
Well, Jesus himself says, if they leave and I don't feed them, I'm afraid they'll pass out on the way. Pass out on the way. We can apply that to the whole way of following Jesus.
Yeah.
If he doesn't give us little breathers and little breaks and little foreshadowings of our destiny, of that ecstasy, little sacramental tastes, we'll pass out on the journey.
Many people are aware of these excellent courses you run at Theology of the Body Institute, but they may not be aware of one of the most recent courses taught by our friend Bill Donaghy. So could you tell them about that course? And that could be a segue for people looking up your other courses and maybe signing up.
Bill Donaghy, dear friend, brother, colleague, just taught for the first time a course through the Institute called Poets for the Kingdom. And he was examining the sacramental worldviews of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is his pet project.
Yeah, he was made for this.
Yeah, he was made. You've had him on the show.
Yeah, love him.
You want to get a taste of a beautiful soul, watch your interview with Bill Donaghy. So I'm the president of this theological institute, Theology of the Body Institute, and my other colleague, Jason Clark, he's the executive director. And so Bill, one of our star faculty members, he came to Jason and me maybe 2 years ago, and he says, I have this idea for a course. How would you think if I were to teach a course on Tolkien and Lewis? I was like, yeah. And we set him free. Just go do it. This is going to be excellent. Because remember I said one of the main errors with John Paul's Theology of the Body is people reduce it to sexual ethics or something. This is what Bill's course did. He went through John Paul's anthropology, which starts with original man before the fall, historical man who's fallen and redeemed, and then, fancy word that JPII uses, eschatological man, meaning who are we in the redemption, the fullness of redemption, in the eschaton at the end of time. That's the full scope of what it means to be human. Bill Donaghy, very creatively, took our students through a tour of Lewis and Tolkien through this paradigm of our origin, our history, and our destiny. Where do we come from? Where are we now? Where are we going? And he broke open how the poetry and the story, the mythology of Lewis and Tolkien is a mythological presentation of the very same truths that JP2 presents in his Theology of the Body. Brilliant, brilliant. I know people said in the evaluations it's one of their favorite courses at the Institute. We're going to offer it again maybe 2025. Bill is doing a pilgrimage to England where he's going to take people through some of the content of this course. That's next July. And then he's going to use some of the content that he gains on the pilgrimage, and he's going to do a version 1.2 of the Tolkien Lewis course in 2025. We will film that, and we will have that eventually as an online offering as well. So we offer our courses in a 5-day format.
Yeah.
And then we film them and we offer them online as well.
Do you go to all the courses or just?
I've been to all of them. Yes, okay. I've been to all of them. I've been to several of them multiple times.
I mean, I know the notes that you give the participants are extremly extensive. I'm sure he could put together a book. I hope he does.
This is going to be his doctoral dissertation, actually.
Oh, wow. Bill is one of the most grateful, humble people I've met.
Yeah. He has a childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And when he was teaching the class, he would read the different characters of the Tolkien stories in different voices, and different voices for the C.S. Lewis characters. And in the evaluations, the students said things like, I just felt like I was a little kid at story time with my dear grandfather or my dad or my uncle or my favorite teacher, and he really does have that ability to awaken that sense of wonder and awe in our, unless you become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom. Bill has that sense of being the child full of wonder.
Theology of the Body. I remember when I first saw the book, because I'd heard about it. It was actually at World Youth Day Canada, and I was
Toronto 2002?
Yeah, I was a Christian for like 2.5 just under 2 years, I suppose, since my time at World Youth Day Rome. Christian in the sense of a believing, professing Christian. And I kept hearing about this Theology of the Body. I'm like, oh, wow, this sounds really powerful. I gotta find this. And then I saw someone on the airplane reading it. I'm like, oh gosh, it's huge.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not. I couldn't even begin to. And then when I even tried, I remember finding it just off-putting because it was big and unruly and kind of repeated itself
It's dense.
sometimes. And
It's dense scholarship.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing.
it's not terribly systematic, is it, or is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's poetic. It's the
Is that just a way of saying non-systematic?
no.
Am I
mean,
wrong in thinking it kind of repeats because these are lectures he's giving, and doesn't he kind of repeat himself at times? Or I don't know, Christopher. I'm not trying to tell you something because I haven't read it. But
I would tell you, I had a great aha eureka moment when Waldstein and I were working on the translation together. This is 2004, 5-ish. And it had come out through the Observatory Romano translation that was whoever was there at the Vatican the day John Paul delivered that address would do the English translation. So you would have wildly different translations of the same terms, like nuptial meaning of the body would also be translated matrimonial significance of the body, spousal significance of the body. So it had to be retranslated in a uniform way.
yeah.
With a certain scholarship, a critical edition, and going to the original text. So Waldstein did that with the help of the Polish and the Italian. We have this now. He relied primarily on the Italian because that was the official translation from the Vatican. But even the Polish, he now says, brings up a little bit more that is still lacking. Anyway, side issue. Why am I talking about this?
Theology of the body, is it systematic? Is it
Oh,
poetic?
yeah. So one of the eureka moments, aha moments, and I had been already studying the text since 1993. This is 11, 12 years later. And Waldstein, in his research, discovered the original handwritten manuscript of the text. And it had headings 7 layers deep that nobody who had been studying the text in the English-speaking world had ever known about. All we had was the translation of these Wednesday audiences. It was written as a book. And he divided it into 135 short talks. And in those talks, the translations, we didn't have the 7 layers deep of headings that organized the argument. Now, having read the text and really studied it in depth, I had come up with my own kind of schema. Okay, I think he's saying this point here, and I'm going back there, and I put an outline together of my own with the help of some other scholar friends, and we had it, I would say, when the actual headings were translated into English, and I can compare what I had put together with some others with what JPII had organized, we were 60, 70%.
That's cool.
Right?
That must have been a nice confirmation for you.
Yeah, it was a confirmation for me. But this was like the map. These headings were the map that took you on the journey to understand the text. That was one of the problems. And you found it in 2002. So this was before the new. Have you ever spent any time with the new translation? All of my books and everything have been updated with the new translation. All of my courses use the new. It's the critical edition. If you're going to be a student of the Pope's teaching, you got to go to the Waldstein translation in English.
Well, I got a job for you. I got a suggestion for you. I would love there to be a kind of audio course where you pay somebody to read the reading, and then you give no more than a 5-minute summary.
Yeah. Pray that we can do that. We've been trying to get the
You
copyright.
could do Theology of the Body in a year.
Well, that's
blow
what-
Schmitz out the water.
Well, no. I actually prayed for this. I proposed that to Father Mike Schmitz. And some other friends, and we kind of collectively, we got to do this. And I, pray that Father Mike Schmitz might say yes to that as a project, because there's a lot of demand for it.
Wow.
But we also,
That would be great.
we're running into an issue with the copyright. Can we use that text?
Golly, how frustrating.
Yeah, it is pretty frustrating.
Especially because if they just came to you and agreed, okay, we'll allow it, but you have to promote this one edition of the book from our publisher, they would blow up.
I know. There's such a kind of
Old way of
short-sighted,
thinking.
old school way of clinging to things without realizing, no. If we do this,
Not only does it benefit more people, but you would make a lot more money. Yeah, that would be really neat. I think I'd be willing to dive into it because I have no desire to pick up the Theology of the Body and try to read it. Just none.
Yeah, I get it.
And you couldn't talk me into having that desire. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's why.
But the Lord may place it on my heart one day, and I will. But
a lot of people have that.
Yeah.
You know, they get excited because there's this talk about theology of the body out there, and they go and grab the Pope's book and they're like, how do I wade through this? I think the particular charism of the Theology of the Body Institute is we translate that dense stuff in a language, in images, in analogies, in stories that resonate with the heart. That's what we do.
I just got to go to Poland. I was in Ukraine twice last year. Well, one time I was only on the border, but both times I was in Poland. It was neat to...
Oh, yeah.
Just to see where he lived and see that, well, what is it? More of a museum of sorts outside of...
Yes. I have quite the memory of seeing that museum for the first time.
Such a handsome man, isn't he?
Stunning, really. I love the images of him as like he's in his 40s and he wears those glasses. And
yeah,
I mean, like he was a stud.
Very attractive guy.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, charismatic. He was an actor. That was part of his charism, you know, the way he carried his body, the way he spoke, the way he interacted with people. I have learned so much as a presenter, as a man who has a message to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much from actors, from comedians, from musicians, from frontmans of bands like Bono. Like, I study these guys, and I see the ones who are masters, and JPII was a master of making a connection with an audience to the point that you're in a huge stadium of 80,000 people, and you can feel like he's connecting with you.
That's right.
That's an art form. And I have learned a great deal from JP2, from actors, comedians, musicians, again, about just how to make a connection.
It's an art form, but it's also a gift.
Absolutely.
And it might even be principally a gift.
I would say all true art forms are genuine gifts.
That you then work with. I remember saying to an artist once, you're very talented, and he said that he almost finds that insulting because he's like, I work my freaking ass off to get to this. It wasn't a gift. But I remember Jerry Seinfeld talking to these people who wanted to learn comedy, and they came to a class, and he said, let's be honest. Yeah. If you were going to make it, you wouldn't be here. There's got to be that raw talent.
Yeah. Well said.
What do you take of kind of contemporary criticisms of John Paul II that he did not nearly enough to stem the tide of bad bishops and sexual abuse? Have you waded into that much?
Yeah, well, let's just assume that all the criticisms are onto something. Okay. There are wheat and weeds growing in everybody.
Right.
To be canonized a saint is not a statement that there were no weeds in this person. John Paul II, and Weigel writes about this in his 2-volume biography. And in fact, Weigel himself lists various criticisms, and you don't get a bigger JP2 fan in the world, I think, than Weigel. So there are legitimate criticisms of anybody. Just like there are legitimate criticisms of you. You're reaching so many people through this platform. Anybody who wants to look at you under a microscope can pick up all kinds of, me too, anybody. So that shouldn't be surprising, right? If we're surprised that we found some weeds among the wheat, well, then we got a wrong understanding of what a human being is and what a saint is. Right? The catechism is very clear. The wheat and the weeds will grow in all of us our whole life long. They are there. They are present. The wheat and the weeds are present in everyone till the day we die, and purgatory if you need it. So to expect that there would not be something off in JP2
I really like that approach of just sort of biting the bullet and then saying, so what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay. Yeah. You press into Mother Teresa, you're going to find issues because she's a human being.
What's interesting is as we know more and more about people because of technology, it's going to be harder and harder to kind of deify each other. Because you look at the saint like St. Anthony of Padua or something, it's like, I'm sure he had a bad day. Yeah. But you don't know about it. He didn't tweet constantly.
Anybody, you've been through it, I've been through it, public criticism when you're in a public eye. And I remember when I went through a real rough one, and I was thinking to myself, I know there's so much more worse you could pick on about what my failings are. These may or may not be my failings. You might be onto something here, but a lot of it was just slanderous stuff. But some of it was like, yeah, there's my weakness, there's my issue, there's my fault. Yeah, I shouldn't have said it that way. I was young, I was green, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, criticism taken. Thank you. But oh my gosh, if you're going to make such a hullabaloo about that, if you only knew how broken I am, if you only knew, I think when we're scandalized by somebody else's brokenness, I think it's a pretty clear indication we haven't been looking at our own. Because the more you're doing your own interior work and you just see layer after layer of brokenness, selfishness, pride, arrogance, lust, you're not scandalized when you see it in others. I don't know. There's something about. I mean, I think that's right. I think the scandal comes when that other has a megaphone. Yeah, or
by megaphone I mean YouTube channel, and they're influencing thousands of people. That's when.
Well, I think it becomes a scandal if it's hypocritical, hidden. I mean, I've made some major blunders in my life, in my marriage, in my ministry. There's a time and a place for, well, that's content for the confessional. I'm not going to announce that on YouTube.
Yeah.
But with a proper certain veil, I've also been very vocal and open publicly in my podcast on YouTube. And my wife and I have talked openly about how I had some emotional infidelities in my marriage. Wendy's talked openly about those wounds that caused her. I've talked openly about that. I don't want anyone who turns to me to come to whatever wisdom and insight I might have to share on John Paul's Theology of the Body to think for a moment that I think I got it all figured out, or I'm some, God have mercy, some perfectly sanctified person. You're going to find a trail of real brokenness in my life. And my spiritual director, I think I've shared this even on this program, Pints with Aquinas, before, but a life-changing moment for me was when my spiritual director diagnosed my neurosis so well. And I'll, with your permission, I'll just say it as he said it to me.
Yeah, please. I know what you're going to say. Please say it.
Yeah, he said, Christopher, you think a saint is someone who has his shit together. He says, you got it all wrong. A saint is someone who has all of his SHIT open to the merciful love of the Father. That was a game changer for me. So you want to point to JPII and say, hey, what about that? Well, maybe that's real, some to use the Polish, maybe that's some JPII shitski. Okay. Okay. That doesn't mean a saint is someone who has all of his shitski open to the merciful love of the Father. And I have no doubt that JPII was on the earnest journey of opening up all of his broken humanity to the merciful love of the Father.
Yeah, I sometimes put myself, when I'm tempted to be too critical of bishops and priests, I sometimes do this little thought experiment. Okay, Matt, you're the bishop of Cleveland. Go. What do I know? What do I not know? That's a lot more. Who do I listen to? How do I know I should listen to them? Even if I should bring the hammer down, what results from that? I mean, there are a million things that follow, isn't there? From every decision we think would be the right one to make. And
I think that, I mean, when you talk about the sexual scandals in the church, there is a particularly deep wound. And when someone is in that much pain, we want to find somebody to be responsible for it. And I don't think that's entirely wrong. But I also think, how do I say this? No, it's not wrong. Someone is responsible. But I'll answer the question. I'll get to my point by putting it this way. G.K. Chesterton, I love him. I know you love him. One of my favorite things he ever did. He was, among many thinkers of his day, was asked to write an essay to be published in a book. What's wrong with the world? Do you know the story? Yeah. His 2-word answer,
Dear sirs, I am.
I am. I am. If we start there and recognize I'm what's wrong with the world. I am. It's not just this evil world out there. This world is evil because I'm in it. Because I have evil in me. I have twisted up stuff in me. If we can start there, and if we begin with that disposition, and this is right out of the gospel, don't point out the speck in somebody else's eye if you're not looking at the log in your own. Right. So start with what's wrong with the world? I am. What's wrong with the church? I am. Stay there for a long time before you have any ability to say, hey, Bishop, or hey, JPII, or hey, so-and-so. You got to look at that. We all need, especially if we're in the public eye, good, if I can say it this way, shit detectors. People in our lot, because when you're an influencer, you have lots of people who do this.
Yeah.
You need people who don't do that to you and will call you on your crap, will call you on your selfishness. If you just surround yourself and your team with yes men who are in a bow to Matt or bow to Christopher or bow to fill in the blank, Scott Hahn or anybody, if you don't have good crap detectors, SHIT detectors in your world who are not enamored at any of your public persona or whatever, public display or public influence, and are willing to say, and I have three really good ones. My wife, my spiritual director, and a brother, I won't name him, who's very close to me in this work, and he calls me on my crap. And I never like it.
Could you give me an example? Does one come to mind?
Oh, I could give you 100 examples.
Just one.
Yeah. Here's a great one. I was giving a talk on Our Lady of Guadalupe on a pilgrimage to Mexico City. And beautiful mother and her Down syndrome son were on the pilgrimage. And his mother came up to me. He doesn't speak so readily to many people. And she said, he wants to talk to you. And this is like a special thing. He doesn't usually do this. I was like, oh, okay. And he motioned me over. He was 16, a Down syndrome boy, motioned me over to I had an image of the tilma there, and I just given this long talk about it. And I point out how she's dancing on the tilma, this victory war dance. And he pulls me over and he says to me, she dances with me. And my friend, partner in ministry who was with me, who's my SHIT detector, saw me put on my Christopher West hat of teacher, where I was like, oh, that's really nice. That's beautiful, Daniel. Good for you. And Jason, I just said his name, he taps me on the shoulder.
Yeah, you don't have
to. That's all right.
Yeah. Thank you.
He taps me. This is not Jason Everett. No. He taps me on the shoulder. He says, Christopher, come here. I said, I'll be right back, Daniel. And he says, knock it off. You are not the teacher here. You're the student. He has something to teach you. Knock off the I'm the teacher guy. Be humble and listen to what he's teaching you. And I was like,
and I fired him.
And I knew he was right.
Yeah.
And I went back to him with a very different disposition. And it changed the whole course of my pilgrimage and brought me some really deep healing that I needed. Because Guadalupe wanted to dance with me. I needed to be the student. And I needed to get off my high teacher horse there. So that's one example.
That's good. What's funny is that some people might hear that and go, well, that wasn't really much of a criticism. But it is, because he knows you.
He knows me.
And he knows
my faults. He knows my faults. And he knows that I can get in this mode where I'm not really paying attention to what's going on because I think somehow it's about me.
Yeah.
Because that's a real temptation when people wait an hour and a half in line to get your picture. And autograph and whatever else. So yes, we need people who know our weaknesses, know our crap, and call us on it.
Yeah. Do a final plug for this book.
Yeah, final
because
plug
that
for this
name is such a good name.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. My wife.
How could you not?
I put a list of titles that I wanted for the book.
Yeah.
And this was one of them. And my wife said, "Pick that one. Pick it."
Okay.
And I
What was another one?
I don't even remember. I have to look
Eating the Sunrise.
Eating the Sunrise. Well,
That
let me
is
tell you
beautiful.
where I get this. A student of mine,
Yeah.
you may know
Yeah.
him. He's now a speaker in his own right, teacher in his own right. He came up to me at a course like 12, 15 years ago. And
you talk about this in the book. Yeah.
yeah,
Keep
and
going.
he said, Christopher, we were talking about beauty and this hunger we have to behold beauty. He says, Christopher, I don't want to just behold the beauty of the sunrise. I want to eat it. I want to take it in. And that just always stayed with me. Eating the sunrise. That's such an image. And it's the subtitle, Meditations on the Liturgy and Our Hunger for Beauty. Well, what are we doing in the liturgy? You and I the other day went to an Ad Orientem liturgy. And I'm a fan. I mean, I'm a fan of Ad Orientem. I love the Novus Ordo. I love the Novus Ordo. We still need to bring about.
Well, this was the Novus Ordo that we went to.
Yeah, this was the Novus Ordo. So I want to draw some.
Yeah.
I love the Novus Ordo. I believe in the Second Vatican Council and its call for liturgical renewal. I also believe we have not yet seen it. We're only 60 years out from the council, and it usually takes at least 100 years after a major council for that council to bear its fruit. So we're a little over halfway there. So I am a real believer that this renewal of the liturgy is coming. But why I love Ad Orientem is because it makes sense out of the cosmos. It opens our eyes to the sacramental worldview we're talking about. Why does the priest pray towards the rising sun? Because what does Scripture say about the rising sun? Psalm 19. The sun comes forth like a bridegroom from his tent, and nothing is concealed from the burning love of the bridegroom. Who are we in the liturgy? We're the bride. The whole earth in the liturgy is the bride, and the rising sun is the bridegroom. I once heard it said, if you're on a bus ride to heaven, you don't want the bus driver facing you, right?
That's correct.
It's not that the priest had his back to the people. He was leading the people on pilgrimage to the bridegroom. He's saying, this way to the consummation of the marriage of the Lamb. And when you understand that meaning, this whole church is orienting me towards the Eucharist. This whole celebration, this whole act of worship. What is worship? We worship whatever we think is going to satisfy our hunger. That's what we worship. What should we worship? The Eucharist, because that and that alone can satisfy the hunger. So I'll close with this. Main idea of my book is we have three choices with that hunger, which is properly called Eros. Idolize, despise, or liturgize. Idolize the things of this world because we think they're going to satisfy it. Despise that hunger and the things of this world because they're only going to get us in trouble. Or liturgize that hunger. In other words, orient it towards the coming of the bridegroom. Open like a bride to the coming of the bridegroom, and don't let anything in your life be concealed from the burning heat of the rising sun. What's going to happen? If you liturgize your longing, you're going to be like a flower opening up, and you're going to that's what the rising sun does to the flower. It opens it up. Pay attention, Jesus says, to the way the wildflowers grow. What's he doing here? As I say in the book, he's not just bidding us to be better botanists. He's luring us into loving the liturgy. You don't know what the liturgy is if you don't know what a flower is. And if you're like, read the book.
Beautiful. Christopher, thank you so much for being here.
Matt,
for sharing with
your
us.
joy, you're an inspiration, and you're reaching many people with this program, and I'm happy to be part of it.
As one priest said, and I've shared it with you and everybody, may he use everything, even my bullshit as manure for their growth.
Amen.
And yours and all of ours.
Amen.
Thank you.